Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1362 of the War News stream. And tonight is a Sunday night fundraiser stream yet again for a really good charity. It is Nova Ukraine, and it's good to see you all once again. And of course, we have very big news tonight. We've seen Ukraine struck critical Russian sites with drones yet again. We've also seen that U.S. officials have begun stalling the Venezuelan strikes, and also Denmark has closed their airspace after strange activity around one of their major airports. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we have been able to hear significant news on none other than the Sunday fundraiser night. We have significant news and developments coming from around the globe, and most importantly within Eastern Europe, as we have been able to see that the Ukrainian armed forces conducted another significant strike against the Russian Federation overnight, hitting critical facilities and infrastructure throughout the entirety of the Russian Federation. Simultaneously, the Russian Federation is dealing with a crippling manpower shortage for their armed forces, and are continuing to attempt to try and recruit further forces by promising them massive sign-on bonuses that most of them will never see once they sign on the dotted line. The Russian Federation has also been seeing that significant losses have been taken today on the front lines in Ukraine, in the Battle of Pokrovsk, Kupiansk, and also within the Severyansky Forest, as Russian Federation armed forces appear to be making very little to no advances along most of the entire front line, including the direction around Mirnorad and Pokrovsk at the moment. Some Russian assaults were conducted over the day, but all were repelled by Ukrainian defenses, and we also have been able to hear that the Ukrainians have signed a major defense contract with France for the provision of arms and equipment well on into the future. Meanwhile, we have also seen that Denmark's airspace has been violated again from what we suspect to be Russian drones, as the Aalborg airspace around the Aalborg International Airport has once again been closed as Danish authorities close in on the area and attempt to discern what exactly is going on and whose drones they are. If they'll ever decide to shoot them down, we don't know. But in the meantime, while the Danish are a little bit indecisive on whether or not they actually want to shoot down the Russian drones, we have also been able to hear other major developments within the area of the Caribbean and America's endless hunt for Captain Crack Sparrow. As after the 11th hour has happened, it appears that the President of the United States has decided in his all-knowing judgment and wisdom, right after we declared Maduro the actual leader of a cartel and a terrorist, we are now apparently going to be entering possible negotiations with the very nation and leader that we just declared as a terrorist group, which sounds to be fairly interesting. Still, the USS Gerald R. Ford also crossed the Barrier Island region within the Eastern Caribbean, entering the Eastern Caribbean officially as of today, while the Venezuelan government continues its rhetoric about the United States of America, and more footage has been published from U.S. Southcom Command confirming more strikes on Venezuelan vessels within the area. In the meantime, we have also seen outside of the United States and inside of East Asia that the tensions between the People's Republic of China and the state of Japan is continuing to increase as the Chinese Coast Guard has conducted some maritime violations around the area of the Japanese-controlled Senkaku Islands just to the northeast of Taiwan, while at the same time China and Russia have conducted a joint naval exercise within the South China Sea earlier today. The Islamic Republic of Pakistan is now saying that everyone in the country is ready to die in the outbreak of war, which I'm not exactly sure if that's true or not, but the Pakistanis are back to their extremely wild and insane rhetoric once again, as they are once again watching tensions rise within the Indian subcontinent between the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan and the Republic of India, while Pakistan is sandwiched right in between, and possibly soon to go to war with both at the same time. Inside the Middle East, things have been no less interesting. The Islamic Republic of Iran has now made the statement today after multiple months of repeating the claim that they still had the ability to enrich uranium and were still working on a nuclear weapons program. The Islamic Republic of Iran today has now stated that uranium enrichment has not been happening in their country for months, and as a matter of fact, there is no ability that they have for uranium enrichment because all of it was destroyed successfully by the amazing campaign of the 12-day war and Operation Midnight Hammer. That is not really believed to be the case, as we have been able to hear statements from the Islamic Republic of Iran for multiple months prior, pretty much confirming from their own statements that they were still working on nuclear weaponry. We have also heard that the Islamic Republic of Iran, in a desperate attempt to see water return to the region, is now beginning cloud seeding in hopes that that will help them to be able to get just a little bit of water to stretch the water supplies within Tehran and the surrounding regions within central northern Iran. We have also heard that U.S. Department of Defense officials have stated that the Talara, a Marshall Island flag tanker that was seized by the Islamic Republic of Iran 2 days ago, was actually seized by an Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps helicopter, with members of the IRGC dropping onto the deck from the helicopter and seizing the vessel in a lightning raid. We also saw large refueling operations conducted by U.S. forces out of Qatar today, with the purpose of that being unknown at the moment. We have also seen that a major explosion has broken out in Beirut, not attached to an Israeli bombing, surprisingly enough, but the Israelis are already preparing for another war in the Gaza Strip, as they are now stating that they will most likely be conducting an offensive past the Yellow Line, which is phase 2 of the ceasefire, and pretty much reoccupying the Gaza Strip once more, right after they signed a peace treaty with the Palestinians and generally Hamas just several weeks actually prior. Moving on out of Israel and on back up into Europe, we once again have also been able to hear even greater news out of the state of Ukraine in the occupied territories, as the Ukrainian armed forces were able to land a major hit on a critical power plant within the Donetsk Oblast, which has knocked out most of the power within that region. But we will be covering all of the major news that we have, each and every single piece, and all of the little stories that we weren't able to cover, at least in our general summary, here at the beginning of the show. Tonight is a night like many others, a wild night of news, and of course, we're going to be making sure to get into every single detail of it, starting with our largest stories first, and then working our way on down into the smaller stories throughout the course of the night. And I also have to say...
Right. And also real quick, by the way, it looks like we do have some breaking news right this second. It looks like some news potentially out of Iran. Right now, I'm seeing many viewers in the chat mention this, so I looked into it, and it does appear to be the case. It looks like there are currently 2 U.S. Air Force B-52 bombers apparently heading for the Middle East right now out of Spain, and I am actually seeing those on Flight Radar 24 right now. It looks like they are both heading toward the Middle East, and obviously we don't know exactly what part of the Middle East they're going to, but it looks like they both left out of Gibraltar, actually, it looks like, and now they're heading over to somewhere in the Middle East. So not really sure what that's about. I'm seeing people speculate that maybe they're heading for Iran to go bomb them or something. That could be possibly something in the near future, but we are seeing those right now, so very interesting to see.
And very interesting for sure. We can actually see one of the B-52 Stratofortresses closely, well, not really that closely, but closely followed in a sense by another, currently flying through the central Mediterranean, near to the direct area of the Mediterranean Sea, and making their way over what appears to be on a flight line towards Qatar or Saudi Arabia at the moment. We will be talking about this later on the stream during our Middle East news segment, but this apparently is a developing event that is happening right now, as their transponders were just turned on, and it also appears that they took off from, I believe it would be this airbase right here, which is a NATO airbase, meaning that these B-52s may have taken off from Shreveport or Barksdale Air Force Base at Shreveport, flown to Spain, and now are conducting the second leg of their journey from that airbase near to Seville in southern Spain, and are now making their way on towards Qatar at the moment for further force buildups by U.S. CENTCOM Command in preparation for possible actions against the Islamic Republic of Iran. But with that story out of the way, at least for now, we will be returning to that here in a little bit and making sure to cover it again once we get into our Middle Eastern news. But with that, folks, it is time for us to start our news coverage as it always goes every single night. And moving us on into the major development of news that we have been able to hear out of Eastern Europe today, we have seen that the Ukrainians have held up to their word on day one of the endless 24/7 drone attack campaign promise that President Volodymyr Zelensky made yesterday in a statement to the public. Yesterday, President Zelensky of Ukraine stated that the Ukrainian armed forces from that day forward would conduct daily attacks overnight on the Russian Federation with hundreds of drones attempting to strike critical infrastructure and strategic targets throughout the entirety of the country. Well, today was day one, and the Ukrainians did not fail to deliver. It's kind of shocking, considering how many politicians lie in the United States on a daily basis. It's a little bit wild to see that politicians in Ukraine, at least the president of Ukraine, is pretty much sticking up to their guns, and has made it quite clear that this is a promise that is going to be carried out on. The Ukrainian armed forces conducted a significant attack, once again targeting the southern regions of the Russian Federation, the city of Saratov, as well as the city of Kursk and several other major cities, all the way up to the very gates of the city of Moscow itself within the central area of Western Russia. These attacks were quite interesting to see. We were able to confirm that the most important part of the attack today that we can get video and picture evidence of so far happened within the city of Kursk. The city of Kursk has actually been talked about on this channel a lot before, because at a time, the Ukrainian armed forces had actually driven all the way up the highway from the city of Suja, the R200, all the way up to Bolshoi Sodatskoy and even farther. At one time, the Ukrainian armed forces during the Kursk offensive had made it all the way to the city of Lagov, just several miles away from the Russian Kursk nuclear power plants that are at the city of, let me make sure that I'm getting this correct, Ivanimo. I was about to call it Ivanovo, which would have been incorrect. Still, the city of Kursk has been talked about a lot on this channel, and it is actually considered to be a frontier city, or a border city, at least for the Russian Federation, and as far as it's concerned. Within the city of Kursk is a wide variety of amazing and eye-watering sorts of industrial ventures, the kind in which the EPA would be shedding a tear over because they generally do not have any EPA regulations within the Russian Federation. Within this city are a couple of major industrial concerns, but no concern is greater than the Ukrainian drone attacks and the concerns that they caused overnight for the Russians that were working at the Sinkum plant inside of the city of Kursk. The Sinkum plant is something generally along the lines of a steel production plant, or something very close to it. I saw 3 different explanations of what this plant is over the course of the day, and even through my own research, it didn't really appear that the answer was wildly clear, so we are generally going to be going with this is something along the lines of a steel making or pig iron facility, one or the other. Still, a Ukrainian drone did slam right into it, and we were able to see the aftermath and damage that was caused literally just a minute or two right after the strike occurred. So let's take a little look at the damage that was caused to the Sinkum plant within Kursk. We see a couple of guys running for the hills as an inferno starts to pour out from the conveyor belt and starts to spill over the factory floor. Wow!
Damn, that's not good. Literally molten, what is that, molten metal on the floor?
It's either a red hot iron or red hot steel. It doesn't appear to be molten. It just appears to be red hot, which is insanely hot. But it does appear that sparks are flying off of it, which shows that something around this conveyor belt. Because if we look at this here at the beginning, at least, right about here where we can look into the conveyor, the color of whatever metal this is, whether it's iron or steel, we're not really sure. It's something around a red hot and kind of getting into the yellowish hot range. That would let us know that this is incredibly hot. This is at least about 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, but at the same time, it's not insanely hot. Straw yellow is when, and also solid white, is when steel or iron has gotten to insanely high temperatures. So apparently, whatever this is, it's maybe a rail or rod of iron or steel that was being moved down this conveyor belt, and the damage caused by the Ukrainian drone caused an issue in the feed rollers that are further down at the bottom of the conveyor belt on the right side of the screen, which led to this iron or steel rod that's being pushed down this conveyor to start crimping on itself, basically turning into a noodle-like spaghetti. And because of that, these sparks started to fly off of that molten rod, or kind of more so hot rod, if we want to call it that. See what I did there? And the sparks started to fly across the floor. Those sparks can still kill you if you were enveloped in them. They're insanely hot, and they don't really cool down that quickly. So that's the reason why the workers were running for the hills. We can also see that there's fires breaking out in the larger tower of the facility, over off to the side. And smoke is billowing.
Chaos.
That actually does. Unfortunately, folks, I do not know what this is actually called, but it is some sort of an iron or steel rod that was actually being fed through the mill to another area, because we can see in that area right here, at least some of the rod that's iron or steel still burning red hot, and smoke billowing off of all the machinery nearby, and it looks like it may have been being moved as a solid rail, or it was going to be turned into plate steel or a coil inside of this next building which the rod was moving into.
Also, you gotta appreciate the guys just filming this whole thing right here. Like, this one guy, or whoever these guys are filming, are just walking around filming the accident. Like, look at this. This is interesting. It's like their whole job site's burning to the ground at this point.
Dude, they're like, wow, I'm getting laid off today. Wow, let me film this. Man, honestly, it's pretty crazy. I see some people in the chat saying that it's a rolling mill. And a rolling mill generally is something along the lines of a steel mill in general, especially if it's an integrated steel mill and not a mini mill. Even mini mills have the ability to have a rolling mill inside of them, but still, this would be generally a steel mill or a steel factory or a steel plant, whichever way you would want to call it, that we're seeing this from. It seems as though a lot of viewers are saying that, and that's generally what I was understanding earlier today, but someone said it was a metallurgical chemical plant, which I've never heard a steel mill described in that way before, and then also someone else just called it a chemical plant in general. I've never seen chemicals being transported by rollers from one mill to the next, glowing red hot. I don't know what kind of chemicals those are, but not the kind that I would ever want to deal with. But it does appear, from what I would understand, to generally be something along the lines of a steel mill. And the exact damage that we saw appears to be near to the area of the rolling mill within this plan. Still, the damage is pretty significant, and the Ukrainians are now going after the steel mills right after they were generally getting done with knocking out most of Russia's refineries. This is a fairly interesting maneuver by the Ukrainians as far as their strategy is concerned, because now it is showing that they're going towards moderate priority war industries, or at least raw material producers that would be vital for the war industry. They're already knocking out Russia's petroleum or generally fuel producing abilities and have succeeded in that, and now in their spare time they're using the drones that are being launched into Ukraine to attack what we would call lower priority targets, including these steel mills. Steel is incredibly important for the Russian Federation to produce, even at this point in the war, as while a lot of Russia's industrial capabilities are largely non-existent in a more refined form, for example, producing tanks, APCs, supply trucks, and so on, one thing that they still can produce quite easily are small arm weapons like AK-47s, RPG-7s, and the like along those categories. And that means that steel is still fairly important for those roles, and not only that, it's incredibly important for other major industries and heavy logistics that would be involved in supporting the Russian war effort. With the steel mill getting hit, it will mostly be out of operation until repairs can be effected. Repairs in a steel mill are a little bit easier to conduct than on a refinery. It is generally expected that at some point steel mills will run into an issue like this, so repairs are not that incredibly difficult to conduct. The machinery is fairly robust, but it will be knocking out the steel mill for a little bit of time. And if this is an integrated mill, which is a fairly different thing than a mini mill, this could actually be causing a great deal of damage. If this is and also let me explain the difference for folks with how steel producing works these days. There are two different kinds of mills that are used around the world to produce steel these days. There are the integrated mills, which is the steel mills that everyone imagines. They're the ones that are covered in smog, pollutants, and are absolutely massive, and pretty much the entire steelmaking process is within the confines of that steelmaking plant. You can actually look at this one here. This is actually the U.S. Steel plant in Gary, Indiana, and this is a perfect example of an integrated mill. Literally every single process that could ever be used in the steelmaking of a process generally is within this singular factory. On the other hand, there are smaller steel mills called mini mills, and I'll bring y'all down to Birmingham, Alabama here to show y'all the, I believe it's the CMC mini mill right here. These are not like the major integrated mills, and this is actually something that's a lot more beneficial in the modern economy, is that these CMC steel mills, like this mini mill here, are actually able to directly correlate their production to the current demand of steel. Integrated mills have to run continuously, 24/7, once they're turned on. If they ever allow the furnaces at an integrated mill to cool down, it will actually lead to a lot of stress cracking within the furnaces, and they pretty much have to destroy the furnaces and rebuild them from the ground up. At an integrated, well, at a mini mill like this, they actually use electric arc furnaces to be able to melt the steel, or at least heat it up to temperature to be able to mold it into different shapes, like plates, coils, and rods, to be able to use in other industrial purposes. This generally means that a hit on a mini mill like this wouldn't be as severe as a hit on an integrated mill, especially if the hit on the integrated mill is pretty much knocking out all plant operations. If all plant operations are knocked out, the furnaces at the integrated mill may have to be pretty much brought offline. And if that is the case, cooling will start to set in, and that may greatly reduce the life of those furnaces, or it may completely render them inoperable due to stress fracturing that will happen due to the rapid cooling of the furnaces. So basically, depending on the type of steel mill that was hit within the Kursk Oblast, this could end up being a fairly significant blow to the Russian Federation, especially if this is completely suspended plant operations at an integrated mill, as this may mean that that steel mill is now out of operation and would have to expend massive capital to demolish and rebuild their furnaces within their factory. But moving on out of that, we also were able to see further on up and within Oriole that the air defense was active over the city of Oriole once again. This is the second night in a row, well, actually I believe the third night in a row that this has happened over Oriole.
I'll tell you what, Oriole's getting they're getting the bad treatment, honestly. It seems like they're getting the Bubba treatment out here. Really troublesome.
Yeah, look at all the debris.
When Ukraine really hones in on a place like Oriole, they really go for it significantly. I think the oil thermal plant has been hit 3 times in a row, it seems like, over the past couple of weeks.
It does seem like that, and we also got to see that another drone of some sort was actually shot down over Oriole again. So the city of Oriole got a free fireworks show again. Oh!
Oh!
Yeah, man!
Yeah, yeah.
Хорошо.
Well, got to say, folks, that is not really a good thing for them. Suffice it to say, that's not going to be the greatest thing for the city of Oriole. And also, moving on to Ryazan, speaking of yesterday's attack, the fire is still burning today. The fire within the Russian Federation's oil refineries burns brighter than the fire that compels the Russian army to continue to fight on the battlefield, because the fire on the Ryazan refinery has actually grown overnight, showing us that the fire is completely uncontrolled, at least for the moment, and local fire teams have not been able to try and reduce the blaze or even really alter its abilities to continue to wreak havoc across a large part of the southern end of the refinery complex. This is letting us know that the Russians are still up the creek without a paddle, and that is also on top of the Saratov refinery still burning today as well. I was not able to get any video or picture evidence of that, but we also haven't heard of the fire extinguished, so we are generally assuming that that fire is still burning as of right now. Moscow is not really happy about this, and they're never really happy about these sorts of events happening within their airspace or generally their nation at large. And it seems as though this just keeps stretching out farther and farther in the amount of intensity and also in the amount of damage and the range at which these drones are able to keep striking into Russia. And Putin, I have heard, is actually crying greatly over this whole deal because they said that once Putin was on top of the world and he was blowing bubbles. He was so happy. Nowadays, they say that he's doing so badly that he's blowing Bubba. I don't know what that means, but beyond that, a lot of people have been talking about the strikes on also the power plants as well. Not just speaking about the internal situation and the strikes within Russia itself, we also have been able to hear of significant hits on the occupied territories around the city of Donetsk, as we were able to confirm that a major power plant within the area was hit. It is the Chekine power station directly outside of Donetsk. This clip shows the hit, and lets us hear it. And we also were able to hear that the entire city of Donetsk is now in a power outage at this moment. So not really the greatest thing for the Russian Federation, considering that Donetsk is a major hub for their operations, especially around the Pokrovsk and Konstantinivka battlefields. And this has led a lot of people to wonder, what the Ukrainians doing, and why are they doing it? Why are they hitting these power plants? Is it justified? Is it not? Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. So it seems like pretty much all the strikes we're seeing recently that Russia and Ukraine are carrying out seem to be targeting the power plants of each of the respective countries. And typically speaking, that is not something permissible in war. But right now we're seeing that Ukraine has clapped back and struck several different Russian power plants, including the Oriol thermal plant again today. And also blackouts have been reported in Russian-occupied Donetsk, and it looks like the entire area is out of power. So what are your thoughts about that? And 76% said power sites are legitimate targets, while 10% said power sites should be off limits, and 9% said it really depends and we need the specifics. So typically speaking, it is not permitted to strike the power plants only if it greatly impacts the civilian population. But if it's actually being used for military purposes, like for example, if it's powering a military base or military equipment, then technically it's a bit of a gray area. It could be technically a military target. But if it's still powering a lot of civilian homes, it kind of just goes into common sense, basically. Does it seem like the attack is going to hurt more civilians than it actually has a military effect? And you kind of have to put that into the equation. So me personally, I think the power sites are legitimate targets. Russia's been striking Ukraine's power sites repeatedly. And also Russia uses the grid, the civilian grid that is, to power the military infrastructure. So I'm with the 76%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I'm with the 76% as well. This is a legitimate target to be able to conduct attacks on and inflict damage onto, because I have to explain this very interesting thing about the rules of war, or at least generally the Geneva Convention. The Geneva Convention is only to be followed until the enemy stops following it. And then, however they stop following it in that specific instance, the Geneva Convention and the rules of war generally go out of the window. Let me give you all a great example of this. The United States of America, after the invasion of Normandy, and even in our Italian campaigns, whenever we would take prisoners of the Germans, specifically that of the Waffen-SS, for this story at least, we would never execute them on sight, because that is generally considered to be a war crime. They are unarmed combatants at that point, they have surrendered, and for that reason, they are generally given protections under the Geneva Convention. However, during the Battle of the Bulge in late 1944, the Germans conducted an action called the Malmedy Massacre, which is where they took about 100 Americans into a field and they gunned them all down and killed every single one of them. The United States of America was able to reconsolidate its forces and push back into that area near Malmedy a little while later and discovered the remnants of the massacre only about 2 days after it happened. After that was uncovered, Eisenhower then sent the word down to the entire U.S. Armed Forces and also all Allied forces in the entirety of the European theater that if any SS soldiers were to be captured, they were to be executed on sight, even if they had surrendered and were unarmed. And from that point forward, that was the rule of the land. Whenever an SS soldier did attempt to surrender, the US and the Allied forces within Western Europe would execute those on sight. So generally, that is similar principles that are being seen in the war in Ukraine. The Russian Federation has been slamming Ukrainian power plants pretty much throughout the entirety of the war. Ever since the first winter in 2022, we have seen the Russians conduct targeted campaigns against Ukrainian energy infrastructure on an endless basis. Not even through the winter months, but recently it started to become a year-round campaign to try and knock out the Ukrainian power grids. So even if we wanted to argue that this is not a military target, that is generally a moot point if we're going off the example of the Malmedy massacre and the U.S. response to that, because the Russian Federation has been breaking the Geneva Convention, if we wanted to say that they were, by hitting Ukraine's power plants, and so for that matter, the Ukrainians can conduct reciprocal actions against the Russians, whether it is within the Geneva Convention or not, by striking their power plants and knocking them off the grid as well in fair turn. So generally, I would say whether or not this even falls within the Geneva Convention, the actions are entirely justified due to the actions of the Russian Federation and their endless campaign on the Ukrainian power grids that has pretty much been going on since the first day of the war. So with that, I hope that addresses that well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we also have been able to get some fairly interesting news of another major event that's happened today out of Denmark. Again, the Danes have come under another drone incursion once more. And once again, around the city that we've already heard about before, around the city of Aalborg at the Aalborg International Airport, or the Aalborg Lufthaven. We have been able to hear that the airspace around the facility has been shut down, as we have heard the Danish authorities state that there is some kind of uncomfortable activity. Apparently, the drone that flew into the airspace this time was a sleaze and said, "Hey, let me see your feet." And then the Danes went, "Okay, we're shutting down the airspace." They're making us uncomfortable.
Yeah. Honestly, what kind of description is that? Uncomfortable activity. That's an interesting way to describe it. It's really interesting how creative NATO countries are getting in describing drone incursions. They call it uncomfortable activity. They also call it unknown sightings. They're really getting creative with their vocabulary here. Anything to avoid saying that it's a Russian drone flying over their airspace, they'll say it.
Yeah, it's just absolutely crazy. Some kind of uncomfortable activity. Man, they're making this thing sound like it's Harvey Weinstein flying through the airspace out here. It's like,
Damn.
What the hell is going on? But apparently, according to the Danes, there is currently suspicion of drone activity, although authorities haven't confirmed any drone activity. There is drone activity going on in the area. The authorities don't want to confirm it because they don't want to have to look like an embarrassment again that they didn't shoot them down and they didn't really chase them down. But the reports, from what we understand, most likely are coming from civil aviation that were operating in the area and spotted a drone within an unsafe proximity to the flight corridors in and out of the runways at the Aalborg Lufthaven. So for that reason, that's why the reports were made. That's why the authorities are out there. It's just that they don't really want to confirm that, at least at the moment for now. So the Weinstein drone is still flying through northern Denmark somewhere out there. And right now, some aspiring actor is being harassed by the drone, and the drone up in the sky going, "Show us your feet." Honestly, that could be Weinstein or any multiple directors in Hollywood at this moment. But nevertheless, it is an ongoing situation, and it is, once again, another drone incursion within NATO airspace that appears to generally be being left unresolved. This is one of about 1 million at this point that has happened, and we haven't really seen anything come out of them yet. We've seen drone incursions endlessly into Germany, into Belgium, the Netherlands, Poland, the Baltic states. We've also heard of drone incursions in Sweden, within the southern part of the country, in southern Norway. We've also heard of drone incursions even inside of France, directly across the German border at Mulhouse. And we are continuing to see that the drone incursions continue to happen practically everywhere, with nobody attempting to stop them at all. It is a very odd sort of an occurrence, and it's one that I have to say, we know who's behind it, and we know what should be done. The Russians are the ones who are flying these drones inside of NATO airspace. Or it may be the Chinese. I would say that it's a small chance that it's the Chinese. It's a very high chance that it's the Russians. Either way, whether it's the Russians or the Chinese, these drones are not permitted to fly in NATO airspace. They are flying in an incredibly unsafe manner. They are threatening the public and their safety. They are also threatening the economic prosperity of these nations by holding up millions of dollars and also making multiple companies burn millions of dollars in additional costs to wait to see that the drones are cleared out of those airspaces that they show up in. And not only that, these pose a major national security risk due to their ability to conduct reconnaissance, deep deep within our borders, and not only that, continuously, possibly being armed while over NATO airspace, and we have absolutely no clue if that's true or not, because we've never shot one of these down to see if they're armed or not. So all of these drones could be carrying around bombs at this moment, and we have absolutely no clue. So for that reason, these drones have to be shot down. I don't know why in the world there's such a large amount of deliberation and hesitancy within the whole of Europe to engage and shoot down these drones, but any means should be taken at this point to shoot them down. Even if we believe that falling debris may cause injury to the public, falling debris causing injury to a very small part of the public is far better than seeing multiple dozens, if not hundreds of people die due to a surprise drone attack that is conducted because of our inaction, or multiple hundreds being killed in a domestic aviation incident where one of these drones gets sucked into the jet engine of an aircraft that is on final departure or final arrival at an airport and really has no leeway to be able to conduct any adjustments or a go around or even stop for that matter to try and avoid a fatal accident. This is a major risk, and it's something that we cannot continue to afford here within NATO, and we should be seeing that if it's not the Danish forces shooting these drones down, the United States should take it upon ourselves to start sweeping these things out of the sky and pretty much give everyone else the blank check they would need to also have the authority to shoot down the drones that are over their very literal own airspace. It's something that we cannot play around with because lives and national security are currently at stake with each passing day that these drones are seen within NATO airspace. And a lot of people have been talking about this uncomfortable activity that was over the Aalborg airport today. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so some say this was even more uncomfortable than hearing the story about Bubbles or Bubba or whatever his name was, but we are hearing that Denmark closed airspace around Aalborg Airport due to the unusual activity or uncomfortable activity as they described it. And are the drones back again? And it looks like pretty much everybody, 85% said yes, it's likely the drones, while 7% said it could be anything, and 2% said it's probably a false alarm. And considering that we've seen over the course of the last couple of months, we've seen literally numerous, more than we can even count, drone sightings over NATO airspace, it's only logical to assume that it is the drones again, and Denmark is simply still scared to admit it, and they don't want to shoot them down. So whoever's made the decision not to shoot them down, I would say it's pretty cowardly, but at this point, it seems like NATO is pretty much made up their mind on this issue. They are not going to take a strong stance, and that's going to be pretty much the end of it, at least for the foreseeable future. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I would have to say that it is most likely Russian drones again. We already know that the balloons that are flying into Lithuania are approved by the Belarusian government and pretty much have their blessing. So I would say that it's very likely that these uncomfortable drones are the Russian drones once again, and they're once again getting free reign over NATO airspace wherever they want to be, which is something that we should not accept. We should not accept it at all. I've already covered this before we even got into the poll, but we should be shooting these down. The United States should be giving a message to every single country in the NATO alliance in Europe right now that if they shoot down one of these drones, the United States is going to be behind them in supporting that action tooth and nail. If the Russians want to have a problem with that, they're going to have a problem with us. It's not going to be Russia having a problem with Denmark and they're on their own. Russia's going to have a problem with the United States if they want to pick a fight with Denmark because they shot a drone down that was recklessly flying through Danish airspace. That should be the case, and I think that that's what we should be moving towards at this point. But moving on out of the situation that's currently once again unfolding within Danish skies, within the area of Northern Europe, it's time for us to start moving on and over into all of the news that we have in the Americas. It's time for us to get into the fun and endlessly confusing objectives of U.S. foreign policy. I cannot wait to do this, everyone. It's really been something I've been looking forward to tonight because I absolutely love it, folks, when our U.S. foreign policy looks like it has a clear track and vision right up until the 11th hour, and then we have to completely change all of our analysis for the 9 millionth time because for some reason, the people in charge just can't make up their mind on what to do about anything. So we are about to be getting on into this one, folks, and this is a lot to unpack over the course of the day. So I'm going to try and cover it in sequence, so that way you can see how confusing this whole thing was today, because the U.S.'s hunt for Captain Crack Sparrow has become a great deal more confusing over the course of the day. The first thing we were able to hear earlier on in the morning is that the Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group had officially entered the Eastern Caribbean Sea. This is a fairly large development. The Gerald R. Ford is carrying about 75 aircraft, nearly up to 80 from what we assume, and also brings with it 3 additional Arleigh Burke-class destroyers that also are each armed with at least believed to be 32 Tomahawk cruise missiles. That is quite a large amount of firepower within a single carrier strike group. This made it seem that a U.S. strike had to be happening wildly soon. The carrier is now well within striking range of most targets in Venezuela, being approximately about 480 miles away, which is well within range of the combat capabilities of an FA-18 Super Hornet, which is the primary multi-role aircraft on board the Gerald R. Ford currently. While that was happening, the Venezuelans were then making additional statements about everything. And I cannot show you all the clips because all of them were copyrighted, unfortunately. But let me give you all a little bit of a description of what was going on. First off, Maduro actually sang John Lennon's "Imagine All the People" in front of a crowd.
Oh no, he's hitting the bottom depths of fear and desperation if you're singing that in the public. I saw a clip of that earlier today. I thought it was AI at first. I was like, surely he wasn't out there singing John Lennon like to the crowd, but he's really trying to pull on the heartstrings, honestly. He's really pulling on it.
Man, he's really pulling on it. And then he also said that the Americans can't even take care of their own people and millions are starving, so they ought to focus on that instead of us. And then they also made a whole bunch of other statements that the Americans are dogs and bastards and they'll pay dearly if they invade our country. And also Daltonator just said, "Are you serious?" "Oh, I'm absolutely serious. I'm not even kidding." He legitimately sang "Imagine" by John Lennon on a stage in front of an entire rally. Like, you can pull up the clip. We just can't show them here because they were all from Venezuelan state TV, so they were copyrighted into oblivion.
Yeah.
But you can find them on Twitter. I think we might have reposted it on our Twitter page. So he actually did that. No joke.
Yeah. But he even had the instrumental behind it too. He wasn't just singing karaoke style. He had the whole instrumental and everything. He sounded bad too. Like, obviously he wasn't going to sing good. So, I mean, he's got like the whole crowd out there and stuff. To me, it looks like what Custer's Last Stand or something like that. It looks like he's out there knowing he's about to go down hard, but he's kind of like just like having his like farewell like situation or something going on. It had a very desperate look to it. And also, what does that say if your leader's out there singing John Lennon before your country's about to go to war? I think that might be a bad sign that things aren't going to go really good.
Man, I'm telling you, man, he's about to end up like Yoko Ono before long, keeping up that kind of business. But beyond that, another thing that's a little bit interesting about this whole deal is I don't really know how in the world singing "Imagine" by John Lennon in front of a crowd in Venezuela is going to avoid a war. I just have no clue. You know, imagine if leaders of old had that kind of idea. You know, like Napoleon loses, pretty much the war against Russia in 1814, and his army retreats, hardly any of it left, back into France. And then as the coalition's armies are marching on France, Napoleon goes out onto the balcony of Versailles in front of a crowd of the French people and goes, "Imagine all the people." Like, man, like, imagine that. Like, that would have been absolutely stupid. Thank God they had a little bit more class back then, and he just kind of took it like a man and went into exile. But still, beyond that, that happened today. And then we also saw that the U.S. Southcom did publish another clip of another strike that they conducted against a suspected narco vessel. This one does appear to be carrying some sort of slabs or bricks of some sort of cargo within the vessel. You can see the operators back here, and it does have a large number of outboard motors once more. So it is kind of leading us to believe that it might be a narco vessel, but once again, the United States has been as little transparent as possible about this, and considering that the only survivor that we've ever seen so far wasn't even generally held within U.S. custody or tried for any crimes like terrorism or held indefinitely for the crime of terrorism, they were just released, it is leading a lot of people in the public to have questions about whether these vessels are even narco vessels at all. But we did get to confirm another strike today by U.S. Southcom Command in this clip.
Who's to say that this isn't just like some independent pharmacist simply moving his goods from one pharmacy to another? I mean, who's to say that that couldn't be the case? You know, sometimes they need express deliveries of pharmaceutical goods to their other pharmaceutical locations. You never can tell. I mean, this could just be, express.
Yeah, I mean, this is absolutely crazy. I mean, the United, Matthew, that's what like some Chinese newspaper is going to put out. America blows up a floating pharmacy. Man, it's going to be
He's
something
a
like.
compound pharmacist. He believed in those natural remedies, those type that you get from plants, they say, that type of remedy. He was moving it at a high speed with his massive 200 horsepower motors on the back on this cheap gondola. He was moving it fast to his next location, and he was intercepted by a mere road pirate. That was all. A little road pirate came along and smashed him. That was a damn shame what happened to him.
Man, thank God we stopped that massive shipment of Tylenol from making it to the Dominican Republic. Imagine what they would look like if they all took that much Tylenol. It would be rough. I mean, a lot of them would end up being into trains like me. I mean, that's a tough world to think of. They didn't even have trains in the Dominican Republic, so that would even be harder on them. But anyways, moving on from that, we also then saw that a U.S. government aircraft from the Department of State, C-32A, was flying from Key West today to the Bahamas. I don't know if they're on some sort of vacation hopping venture going straight from Key West to the Bahamas. I have no clue. We didn't really know the personnel who were on board this flight or why they're flying around in this area, but that was ongoing during the day as well. Then comes the absolute stupidity of it. Like, I can't even really hide, folks, the frustration at this point. So if you don't like it, I'm sorry, you're just going to have to get with it. But let me just cover it and we'll just get into it here in a second. So the President of the United States has now stated that we are going to negotiate with the Venezuelans. According to a direct quote, we can't play the clip because it's most likely copyrighted. We may have some discussions with Maduro and we'll see how that turns out. They would like to talk. We then also were able to hear, just right after that, like literally 30 minutes after that the U.S. State Department designated Cartel de las Soles, headed by the illegitimate Nicolas Maduro, as a foreign terrorist organization. So while the president's completely now backing off of strikes, the U.S. State Department declares Maduro a terrorist at the same time that's heading a terrorist organization, the Cartel de las Soles, within Venezuela. So the confusion here is just to the utmost extreme. So apparently now I'm guessing, like, just this is literally what this is now. The United States is going to enter negotiations with an what we claim officially as the United States to be an illegitimate narco-terrorist cartel leader that isn't even a legitimate leader of Venezuela, according to the U.S. claim. We're going to enter negotiations with that guy. And also, to add on to that, we then started to hear that some rumors from U.S. officials were that strikes on Venezuela are very close. So this is the most confusing sort of a foreign policy picture that it has been seen in about 2 weeks so far. I have absolutely no clue what the hell this is. It makes no sense. Let me just explain why. When you work foreign policy, the vision has to be clear. There is no time to sporadically change your mind and do stuff like this at the last minute. And also on top of that, another thing that you can't do is that you can't be so sporadic and harebrained that the Department of State isn't even on the same page and 30 minutes later declares them a terrorist organization and declares the guy we're going to get negotiations with as a terrorist. You can't do that. Like if that is how sporadic and harebrained the current leadership is in foreign policy, we don't, like, nobody knows what they're doing at all. The Department of State is now having to race to figure out what the new stance is because apparently they hadn't heard about it because they wouldn't have declared Maduro a terrorist leader of a narco-terrorist cartel if we were about to get into talks with them. This, by the way, just to explain to y'all the position that is actually happening with us right now, if we actually get into talks with Venezuela, this would be like the United States getting into talks with Osama bin Laden post 9/11, with how we painted Maduro to be. We painted him to be the killer of hundreds of thousands of Americans because of the fentanyl trade that is flooding into the United States of America that directly kills tens of thousands of Americans every single year. So we're saying that Maduro has more blood on his hands from the fentanyl trade and being involved with the cartels than Osama bin Laden even had after 9/11. That's what we're saying about Maduro. So we've made that claim. We've built this guy up into the boogeyman on the foreign policy level, on an official level, mind you all. This isn't something that we're just pretending. This is the Department of State's official line of rhetoric about Maduro, is that he is the boogeyman, and now we are going to enter negotiations with the boogeyman. And also on top of that, we're backing off after we've clearly seen that with the situation we made right now, if we back off, the Russians and the Chinese are just going to flood Venezuela with arms and equipment and probably eventually try and train up the Venezuelan armed forces to be a competent fighting force. So because of the, like, I don't want to make this sound like we're blaming the president, but at the same time, a lot of this is what was his plan. Because of his dogheadedness of creating the Venezuelan problem well ahead and in advance than when it had to be a problem, we had larger fish to fry around the world everywhere, and Venezuela was like the 7th priority. But then we made it the #1 priority. We made it into the shining thing, an Achilles heel that every other country could take advantage of. So Russia and China could flood them with weapons. We then make it into a situation that we are now forced to deal with. Otherwise, the Chinese and the Russians will just continue to support and arm the Venezuelans if we allow them to continue to buy time. And then in the midst of that, we declare this guy is the boogeyman of the planet and killing everyone. And then after we do that, just a little while later, we then say, oh, by the way, we're now going to stop everything and we're actually going to get into talks with this guy. That is, like, this is just the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Like, this is...
Well, to put it in numbers right here for people to understand exactly what this is going to cost the United States, because a lot of people have been saying, well, this is costing the United States XYZ for the United States military to deploy to Venezuela. Here's the estimates. Here's the estimates of generally what it's costed so far to make all these naval, Air Force, and all these other U.S. military deployments. It's approximately $18 million a day. That's the going rate right now. So $18 million a day is being spent right now to keep those forces there every single day. And so far, the published estimates for what this has cost so far is at least over $600 million, and quickly and rapidly approaching the $1 billion mark. So for this big escapade right here, if the U.S. ends up not striking Venezuela, it will have cost most likely over $1 billion just to make this deployment right here. So to me, seems like a huge waste of money. $1 billion, I know we've gotten a little bit out of whack with what money is these days for at least the military spending, but $1 billion is quite a bit for one big bluff like this. So if the U.S. ends up not striking Venezuela, we will have done all this and wasted $1 billion, and then also embolden Venezuela and embolden all of our adversaries to once again see that our bluff was called and the money was blown and nothing came out of it. So at this point, we got the assets there. The money's being spent. At this point, topple Maduro. They're down there. They get the job done at this point. Why are they suddenly stalling and getting cold feet about it if they were already spending the money and they're already there in the first place? I don't get it.
And I see some people saying, and this is actually kind of a good point, when you look at this through the lens of a foreign policy perspective, this makes no sense. But when you look at it through a mafia-style lens of conducting business, then this makes sense. If that is the case, which I'd have to assume because it doesn't make any sense at all working off of foreign policy the way it's supposed to be worked off of, if this is a mafia-style lens, then the current leadership would be the worst mob boss on the planet, because every single foreign policy deal that we've made so far has fallen through completely. There's not one that has succeeded. Peace in Ukraine, completely impossible. As a matter of fact, it looks like we may have even exacerbated the situation with the stupid stuff that we did for about 8 months. The Israel and the Palestinians, or generally Hamas, complete failure. The Israelis are about to go and reoccupy the whole Gaza Strip within the next week, whether we want them to or not. The Iran war, generally Operation Midnight Hammer, complete failure as well. The Iranian nuclear program is still alive and well, and because we couldn't even hear the truth about that, we just stuck our head in the sand and pretended like we actually succeeded in what we were supposed to be doing when we didn't. Then also on top of that, the India-Pakistan situation hasn't been resolved. We got involved in the middle of that for no damn reason and got them to get into a ceasefire, and they're about to get right back to killing each other because they hate each other, and we didn't resolve a damn thing when we went down there. Thailand and Cambodia literally ripped up the only peace treaty that we actually got signed into effect, a ratified peace treaty, ripped it up because we didn't resolve the underlying issue there either. This has been a complete failure. If this whole thing is being a master of negotiations and the deal, this is the worst negotiations and deals that I've ever seen in foreign policy. Like, at least in a short amount of time like this, within less than a year, this has been absolutely abysmal. I just really can't even wrap my head around it, and then it just keeps going. Like, we do stupid stuff like giving a $40 billion bailout to Argentina when we really have no invested economic interest that is even that large with Argentina. So we're just pouring money into a country we have hardly any economic dealings with to that degree for nothing. We like it's very aggravating. It's incredibly. And then also another thing, as far as our force projection goes and our strategic interest goes, then at the same time as we're saying that we are going to change the name of the Department of Defense and we don't even do it correctly, so it's still the Department of Defense, to the Department of War, which is an unofficial side name because it wasn't done through an act of Congress. We are saying that it needs to be the Department of War because we're going to start winning everything and we're going to go around the world kicking everyone's ass and getting into a war everywhere. And then at the same time, we're slowly pulling forces out of areas like the Baltics and the Middle East and elsewhere, claiming that everyone else's problems is theirs and we're just going to focus on home defense, although we're the leader of the sphere. And then every other time that it advantages us, we act like we're the leader of the sphere. And then once it doesn't advantage us, we back off and tell everyone else it's their problem. It just makes no sense at all. Like, none of this makes any sense. This is the next stupid thing that makes sense. That makes no sense. At the 11th hour of this entire situation, when we're about to actually go in and have to deal with Venezuela, because now we've made it into a situation we cannot avoid, then we back off for some reason and stall again. It's the most indecisive foreign policy scene in world history at this point. I would say that at this point it's an effective failure. But nevertheless, a lot of people are talking at this moment about what they are thinking is going to be coming around the corner because of the complete indecisiveness of U.S. foreign policy currently. So, Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. So we are hearing today that the U.S. president said late this evening that he plans to talk to Maduro and see how it turns out. And he said that Maduro wants to talk and will the U.S. back out of strikes? And it looks like pretty much the polls all over the place. 33% said yes, the U.S. will back out of strikes, while 30% said no, U.S. strikes are coming soon. And 29% said it seems like a 50-50 chance of that right now. And here's my thing, folks. I am not against, dealing with Venezuela in a logical sense. But at the same time, though, we've been hearing reports, or at least allegations, that over the last couple of weeks, Maduro has been trying to reach out to U.S. officials to negotiate. And at least based on that reporting, it sounds like those talks were turned down or they didn't go anywhere. So now that we spent getting close to almost $1 billion, that's the current estimates on military deployments, now all of a sudden the U.S. officials seem to be willing to talk to Maduro after we spent that money, which seems like a waste to me. It seems like a waste because we already had leverage over Maduro. Maduro was already scared of the U.S. military. He already knew the potency of it, and we already had the leverage. So making this deployment in a physical sense simply wasted money. And now it looks like the U.S. might be planning to back out of strikes. They could still happen, by the way. It's very possible they still happen, but it just seems weird to stall it now with it costing about $18 million a day to keep the forces there. It seems weird to start stalling it to see if Maduro wants to talk, considering the reports already said that he was trying to negotiate in the past. So it seems like more confusion, not trying to get political with it. It just seems like confusion because if we're spending the money to send the forces down there, then do the job you sent them down there for, which was to go in and basically overthrow Maduro. That was the U.S. Stated goal. So why not carry that out? Why are we going to start talking now after the $1 billion has been spent? But Enforcer, what say you?
And just to put this into perspective, folks, because I saw someone say, no, we actually make money off of our trade with Argentina. Get your facts straight. Our collective trade with Argentina, imports and exports between the two of us, is totaled at a whopping $26 billion as of 2024. And this isn't a made-up number. This comes directly from the Office of the United States Trade Representative, which is a government website. This is our trade with Argentina. So we gave them $40 billion just about a month ago. And that is 2 years of total trade of us exporting stuff to Argentina and them importing stuff to us over 2 full years, and we just gave them $40 billion. It would take us actually probably about 4 straight years to make that back at some point from what we gave them. Like that doesn't make any sense. Just to hit that side note there. Why the hell would we even throw that much money at them? Because it's not like that's an investment that's returning any value, and it's over 4 straight years. I mean, hell, that's insane. We don't even give the Israelis that kind of money every year in defense, and we give them bukus of money compared to what we hand out to most other people. The Ukrainians got their palms outreached facing the sun, and they're getting nickels. The Israelis are getting $20 billion a year, and then Argentina gets $40 billion in a single 1 month period, and we hardly even have $30 billion in trade in between our exports and their imports in 1 year. I mean, that doesn't even make any sense from a financial perspective.
Also, by the way, just to keep it technical, because some people are going to say this, and I see a couple saying it already, it was technically a currency swap. That was the form of bailout that we gave to Argentina. It was a currency swap. So we traded what I believe is U.S. dollars. They traded it for I believe the Argentinian peso, I think is their currency. So they flip-flopped it a little bit. And some people argue that technically it wasn't a bailout because it was a currency swap. And then some people argue, well, it was obviously a bailout because we gave them $40 billion of U.S. dollars in exchange for the worthless Argentinian peso. So in my opinion, it was a bailout. I mean, it was a bailout without necessarily just giving them the money. It was a currency swap in name only. So I mean, it seems like a bailout to me, but I guess it's up to interpretation.
And well, it is a bailout because here's how that's going to work. The Argentinian peso is going to collapse completely here soon. That's guaranteed. So we took a whole bunch of money that's going to be worthless because it's going to implode here in a couple of months. And in return, the Argentinians got $20 billion worth of American US dollars, which are not going to be imploding within the next several months and are far more valuable than the Argentine peso, considering that the peso in Argentina is about to cease to exist in a couple of months. So in short, it's a complete bailout to the Argentine government. There's no other way to look at it, because it's not like the US is going to go around going, yes, I'd like to buy a whole bunch of Bradleys for the army, please, and I'll pay in Argentine pesos. They're not going to do that. The currency is completely worthless. And on top of that, when the Argentine peso collapses here in a little bit, they're going to have to completely reform a new currency, like most countries do in that sort of a situation. And then the currency that we have in the Argentine pesos that we got in that exchange is going to be completely worthless. So it is a bailout. But I would have to be with the 29% on the poll. It's a 50-50 that it could go either way at this point. There's no point even trying to predict what the foreign policy is at this point, because it doesn't matter. Like, it has absolutely no meaning. We just have to take it day by day at this point and figure out what's going to be happening in the next day or two, and just take it day by day, because you never know what's going to happen. We can nuke the Venezuelans tomorrow, or we might give them Florida, just to make them happy and it's called the greatest deal in history. I don't know. So with that, I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. But I'm not really too happy with this. And before anyone starts saying, "Oh, you foresters don't have any experience in foreign policy," it doesn't take a master to have experience in foreign policy. You don't have to be the dojo master of foreign policy to see something that just makes no sense, and a whole bunch of things that make no sense. Like, this isn't even political. This is just speaking from the perspective of none of this makes any damn sense. Like, with the prior administration, trickling support by drip feed to Ukraine made no damn sense either, and we pointed that out freely a load of the times that was happening every time that was brought up, and every time a congressional spending bill would come around and it was another drawdown of just a few billion, we'd always go, this makes no sense. We need to really arm them up so that way they have a surplus of arms and they're not just, pretty much paying the bills in terms of arms and supplies every single day. And instead we trickle fed them, and we brought that up for a long time, and we brought up the whole Chinese balloon thing over the United States, which was a huge national security violation and a huge risk, and so on and so forth on a million different topics. This stuff is just very infuriating to look at. And for anyone to say that we have no experience and so therefore we cannot talk on foreign policy, one, we can talk about whatever the hell we want, first off, and two, if we were just talking out of our ass and we were just talking hot air, then we would be wrong. We would be wrong somewhere, and we're not wrong anywhere. We brought up the whole thing in between Israel and Hamas. We said that's not going to last. That is about to end. The Israelis are about to reoccupy the whole Gaza Strip again, so that's about to end. We said that the India-Pakistan thing was not worth getting involved in because it's going to turn into a shooting match again because they hate each other, and that's happening again, literally within the same year we tried to resolve it. And we also said that the whole Thailand-Cambodia thing wouldn't be able to be solved because we're not fixing the underlying issue of the ownership of the Preah Temple. And believe it or not, they've been getting in shooting engagements over the past few days, and they're about to go into a war again. So where in the world have we been wrong? Now, on top of that, the peace in Ukraine, the lauded peace in Ukraine that was going to come immediately, where in the world is that? That is more elusive now, a peace in Ukraine, than it was at the start of this year. because it was completely impossible from the outset. And so, us even attempting to talk to the Russians, knowing that it was going to be impossible to get anything done with the Russians, just emboldened the Russians to keep on going a little bit farther and see how much farther they could go, because it showed that the U.S. resolve on continuing the war might be waning a little bit. We haven't been wrong on a single one of these foreign policy issues. If we didn't know anything about foreign policy, which it doesn't take a damn genius to know about it, we would be wrong on something, and we're not. On all four of those individual instances, in Eastern Europe, in the Middle East, in the Indian subcontinent, and in Southeast Asia, we've been correct on each and every one of them. If we can get it correct, it's not that hard. It's not hard at all. So
Yeah, do you think that maybe the U.S. is realizing that we shouldn't get bogged down with Venezuela, and they're realizing that the last second, so they're trying to find a way to sort of worm the way back out of it by starting these talks, which was apparently already being offered by Maduro in the prior weeks, but was apparently turned down by U.S. officials, at least according to the reports in the public. So do you think maybe they're realizing it's not a good idea and they're trying to find an off ramp here because they don't want to really get bogged down? And now that the moment of truth is coming up, they just don't want to follow through with it.
I mean, it's possible. I mean, it's not out of the question, but at the same time, it's like now it's too late. It's like that carrier strike group has literally set sail. It's out of CENTCOM. There's no carrier group in CENTCOM right now. That's probably why the Iranians seized the Talara, because they knew that there was going to be no fast response to what they're doing. So the blockade would be able to exist for a little bit of time and start putting on some pressure with a vice clamp on the West. That's what they probably knew. And of course, we're sitting here, folks, on air, because people always want to say, oh, the enforcers, they have no experience in foreign policy. Like anyone ever gets experience in foreign policy until they're actually making the decisions, which, it's like that a statement in itself is stupid. But beyond that, we sit there and say there's larger fish to fry. We were saying that with the whole Venezuela deal when it first became an issue. Bigger fish to fry everywhere in the world. Three big ones: Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and East Asia. 100% that's where our attention needs to be right now, and Venezuela can be dealt with in 5 to 7 years. And then we make Venezuela into the number one issue. And now it is a huge issue because the Russians are involved to a small degree. And that shows that both of the Russians and the Chinese will get involved if we back off and walk away. So now we can't walk away from this thing. We've forced it into a situation we have to deal with. And now we've stripped all of our carrier groups from the Middle East. The Iranians are going ham. And it's been proven immediately that that was a far bigger fish to fry in the Middle East than the Venezuelan situation ever would have been. So I guess maybe they're backing off now, but they should have known that earlier on. We were saying that about 2 months ago.
Yeah, I guess at this point, what would people rather see at this point? Would y'all rather see the U.S. follow through with toppling Maduro at this point, militarily that is? Because I'm not sure if Maduro is simply going to walk away. I did see a couple people telling me in private messages earlier today they believe that apparently Maduro is going to simply walk off after he gets threatened by the U.S. Enough, probably in the next week or so. I would be surprised about that, to be honest. I think Maduro might try to hold out for a while because really, where is Maduro going to go? I'm not sure if he really has a nice landing spot for him to go. So I think Maduro will try to ride it out. He's scared to death right now, but I think he's going to try to ride it out and hope the U.S. is maybe going to back off. Or would you rather see the U.S. simply take the billion-dollar loss from this deployment and simply basically tuck tail and go back home at this point and realize this was a mistake? We shouldn't have got this involved in Venezuela in the first place, and we'll just call it off. Which one would people rather see? Which option, I wonder?
I wonder. I truly wonder on that one. But with that, folks, we're going to be moving on from that topic because it brings me endless frustration at this point. But we are going to be moving on from that and getting on into the rest of the news for the rest of the night, which we still have a lot of it to go over in East Asia and also in the Middle East and Ukraine. But before we get on into all that, I do want to make sure that we take a brief moment to be able to talk about the fundraiser, which has reached a whopping $1.6 thousand.
Wow.
Holy moly! That's actually quite a large amount. And we are less than $1,000 away from reaching the fundraiser goal. And Matthew, do we have top donors to be able to shout out and congratulate for their impressive support, along with everyone else that we can call out for helping this fundraiser to get to where it is so far?
Yes, we do. We do have our top donors so far of the night. We're sitting just around $1,600 raised, which is fantastic. That's well over 50% of the way to the goal, which is fantastic at this point in the stream. And also, a big shout out to our top donors so far. We had a 200 from Espen Turgenhagen, as well as a 150 from Danny B, and a 100 from Peace
Hey!
with War, as well as Bobby, also known as LC39A. And then we also had a 100 from Hal Rose, as well as Old Warrior, and a 50 from Brian Sador. And so far, I believe that is all of our top donors of the night. But nonetheless, even if we were not able to call your name off, a huge shout to everybody for donating tonight, because without all the support to the fundraiser, we would not be sitting at almost over 60% of the way to the goal right there. So fantastic to see, and a huge shout to everybody once again. But Enforcer, what say you?
And a truly incredible thing to see that we have been able to raise $1.6 thousand nearly at this point in the stream for Nova Ukraine, which is an absolutely amazing nonprofit and is helping out incredibly inside of Ukraine. I have to thank each and every single one of you, all the folks we were able to call out, the top donors, and all the folks we weren't able to call out for supporting this fundraiser tonight and helping it to keep on rolling, because it truly is incredible and wonderful to see that we are continuing to support American and Western interests around the world, including those inside of Ukraine. And so a humongous shout out to each and every single one of y'all. And with that, it is time for us to move on into the questions segment. And also, really quickly, to address this, folks, because I see some people saying some things, I want to make sure to address them very quickly. One, when we say things on this channel, we mean them. And I'm never apologizing for anything that I say, as we usually plan it out, at least to some degree. Secondly, our analysis on everything is as apolitical as it gets. If foreign policy is good, it's good. We'll call it for what it is. And we have called a couple of things like that in the past. When it sucks, and we're going to say that it sucks. If you don't like that and you're too political to hear that, either for the Biden administration when we did that then, or for the Trump administration now, this might not be the channel for you. I would highly advise, if you're left-leaning and you can't really handle hearing the truth sometimes about the bad foreign policy that the prior administration did, that you go and find some left-leaning political pundit. That'll probably be within your camp. And if you're right-leaning, maybe you want to go watch Ben Shapiro and listen to whatever the hell he has to say, or some other show like that. We don't do things like that here at all. We never will. And if foreign policy is stupid and it makes no sense, we're not going to glaze it and say that's the greatest thing on the planet, or act like it's just nothing burgers. That's how we've always done it. That's how it's always been cut, and that's how it's still going to be cut to this day. If something sucks, it sucks, and that's what it is. It doesn't matter who it is, and it doesn't matter if you like them or not. So with that, I hope that does address that well, the best we can. And if you don't believe that we've always been like this, you can go back and watch all of our shows from day one, when the administration was left-leaning and it was run by Biden. And you can also hear us complain and bitch about a whole bunch of stupid foreign policy actions that were being done back then, like how we weren't really helping out the Israelis when they were dealing with Hamas and Hezbollah simultaneously, or when we weren't bombing the Houthis when they were conducting a blockade in the southern Red Sea, or when the Chinese balloon flew over the United States, or when we were trickle-feeding support to Ukraine. We brought up all that and complained about it back then, and we had the same complaints from people who were left-leaning back then, that we were a whole bunch of Republican Nazis because we were criticizing him. I don't give a damn. We'll criticize everyone. It's a free country, and also, when they suck at foreign policy, they just suck at it. It's not that hard to see. You don't have to have experience. You don't have to be a Henry Kissinger. You can just see it and call it for what it is. So with that, we are on into the questions. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right. So with that, folks, it's now time to move on to our questions. And also, we have an interesting poll running on that topic right there. And it's quite an interesting result. I'll let it sit for a few more minutes, though, to get all the votes in on this before we go over it. But be sure to answer that poll right there, because right now, that's the big thing that's causing people to go berserk in the chat, is this question about Venezuela. So very interesting. But with that, also, by the way, a big shout out to Bad Company. And Bad Company put in a $50 support to the fundraiser. And we are now sitting at $1,700 raised with this Ukrainian fundraiser right here. So fantastic to see once again. And Ukraine still needs all the help it can get on the humanitarian side of things. So that help is going to be much appreciated. And of course, it's going to a really good cause, which is Nova Ukraine. And we've gone over them many, many times in the past, and a really good charity indeed. They do really good work. But jumping into our questions here, we actually have, believe it or not, super chats. There are apparently still a way to put in super chats on the Sunday night fundraiser stream.
The loophole's still there.
Yeah, we still have super chats tonight, by the way, and also a huge shout out to the folks that have decided to super chat the channel tonight as well, and we do appreciate that. So we will grab those first, of course. And this one goes to ARP Bob, who put in a $100 donation to the channel. And thank you very much, ARP Bob, for that
Hey!
massive support. By the way, that is the largest super chat tonight, and we do appreciate that very, very much on a Sunday night of all nights, and we appreciate that. But Enforcer, what say you?
Hey, and a humongous thanks to you for the incredible support and helping this channel to keep on running, even on a Sunday night fundraiser. And you didn't throw in a comment, but we are still massively appreciative of the support and you helping this channel to keep on running, because you help us to be able to run the Enforcer show the way we've run it for 1,361 days. And I've got to say that it's an incredible thing to know that people enjoy this channel so much that they want to continue to support it well on into the future, and to continue to help us to be able to cover the news in the same way that we do every single day, with our analysis being thrown in, which always pisses off the political people, which I don't really give a damn about, because you can never appease those people. Like, I mean, hell, you know, go look over there right now. They're all eating each other alive, so why in the world would I want to get in that crowd? You get eaten alive eventually, and then spat out once your usefulness is expended. We don't have to count on that here on this channel, because we just do what we want. We're generally a free agent, and we criticize everyone. And so that's honestly the best way to be. And so I got to thank you incredibly for the support and helping this channel to keep running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep our analysis the way it is and our reporting the way it is since day one. So humongous thanks to you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right. And with that, folks, also, by the way, I will say this. I want to give a little detail here about the Argentinian peso swap with the United States that me and the Enforcer are calling a bailout, by the way. I do want to give some quick information on that, just because there's a lot of people debating whether or not that's a true bailout or not. Here's the facts. I've done some quick research on it real quick just to clear this up. It looks like right now, technically, the U.S. has not taken a loss on that $20 billion currency swap. Right now, it seems to be a $20 billion currency swap and not a $40 billion. There is talk of it being a $40 billion swap, but it looks like for now it's a $20 billion swap. And as of this time, there is no technical loss of value on the United States side right now, but the loss will be registered when the currency swap is reversed. So we will not know exactly how much money the U.S. has lost until that swap is finalized or reversed, or whatever term you want to use for it. We won't know until later. So we don't know how much we're going to lose. Right now, the Treasury is claiming they've actually made money from this swap, which I'm not sure how that's really possible, considering the peso is not really worth anything. But they're claiming they've made a profit. So we'll have to wait and see on this one. I guess you could say the jury's still out on it. I would still call it a bailout, though, because if it's not a bailout, then why do we do it? How does it benefit Argentina if it's not a bailout? So, you know, that's just my take on it, but just to give some more details about that situation. But Enforcer, would you like to weigh in before we move on to our next super chat?
Yes, and I'll explain something about North Korea to try and explain this to how it works for all of y'all. North Korea's money is worthless outside of North Korea, so they have to be able to get foreign currency to be able to use for the government in North Korea, so that way they can buy stuff around the world. So what North Korea does is that they get involved in a whole bunch of illicit operations, the drug trade, arms dealing, and also shipping out North Koreans to work in foreign labor in other countries, and they take the money that those workers make working in the logging camps of Siberia and Russia, and they pocket it straight for the government. Those workers don't get paid anything. And then with the warlords in Africa, the North Koreans will ship arms to them and get paid by these warlords. Or they'll do drug trades and they'll get money from some cartel or illegal group, like some sort of an underworld group, for transporting the drugs to them. And the North Koreans are able to gather up US dollars, rubles, and renminbi, or whatever currency they would want, to be able to buy stuff around the world with, because North Korean money's worthless. That's the same thing that we've kind of done with Argentina. Argentine currency is at a high risk of becoming completely worthless, because the entire economic institution of Venezuela is very close to collapsing right now. So what we did is we said, hey, Argentina, you want to do what other communist states have done historically, which is to get a little stockpile of US dollars, so that way if your currency and economic institution collapses, you're not really even beholden to that. The government will still be able to operate in your country, because you'll just be able to buy stuff that you need or pay pay people with US dollars, which will still have some value. And the Argentine government said, yes, I would like that very much, because we are at a high risk of complete economic and financial collapse right now. So it would be a lot better to have US dollars, because if the Argentine peso collapses and they have no giant reserve in the tens of billions of US dollars, then that means that they're completely up shit creek. The government doesn't even have money in Argentina at that point to pay for anything to continue to function. On the other hand, though, if they exchange with the United States, which is what they did, their pesos for US dollars in the form of 20 billion US dollars, if the Argentine financial institution collapses and the peso literally evaporates overnight, the Argentine government still has 20 billion US dollars that still have 20 billion US dollars in value that they can buy stuff with or pay their government workers with to keep the government running to some minimal degree. That's what it is, in a sense, the part that's a bailout. So it's not a bailout as in we literally just gave them money. It's a more creative way with a whole bunch of extra steps of just giving them money. So that's what it is. That's why I'm calling it a bailout, because that's the only reason why we would do a currency exchange like that with the Argentinians, because it's not like their currency has any value. The United States hardly has any foreign currency reserves because we are the foreign currency reserve. The US dollar is the main currency that everyone trades in the world. Why would we want Argentine pesos? We're not, no one in the world backs their faith in the Argentine peso. Everyone in the world, for the most part, backs their faith in the US dollar. So it would make no sense for us to even give up $20 billion to get 20 or however many billion dollars of worth it would be in Argentine pesos. It doesn't even really make any sense. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well, at least in my degree. That's why I'm calling it a bailout. And I don't really even understand why, because we don't even have a large enough trade in value with Argentina annually to even justify that. If it's 20 billion, it's close to 1 year's worth of imports and exports with Argentina total. If it's 40 billion, then it's 2 years worth. And I don't even understand what the point of investing in Argentina that heavily in a bailout would be worth it for. I don't really get it.
Well, we obviously don't get into politics here on the channel, but I'll just leave it at this. This isn't political to say it's politics, but it is politics. Like it's clearly politically related, and at least in my opinion. Argentina and the leadership there is very friendly with the U.S. leadership, and it's not necessarily a kickback for Argentina. It's more like saving grace for the policies that Argentina is putting forth, because it kind of matches up with some other policies that maybe the U.S. might agree with. So that's pretty much it. I'll have to leave it at that, though, because otherwise it gets into politics if we get too specific with it. But I think everybody knows pretty much what I'm talking about with that. But yeah, there's definitely a political reason behind it.
But with that, I hope that does address that well. And also, Matthew, do we have any more questions to go over in this question segment?
Yes, we actually have two more to get to, by the way. And also in the meantime, though, a big shout out to Samuel Sizamonski, who put in a $50 support to the fundraiser, that is, and a huge shout out to you, Samuel, for that generous support right there. We're currently sitting just shy of $1,800 raised, which is fantastic to see once again. We're getting very close to that goal, about $700 away from smacking that $2,500 goal right there. So be sure to donate if you can. But jumping into our next question here, our next super chat, this one goes to Howard Turgell. And Howard puts in that $20 support, and thank you very much, good sir, as well, for that generous super chat. He said, best detailed information anywhere, available anywhere, and thanks, enforcers.
And I gotta say, a huge thanks to you for the massive support and the kind words. We are always greatly appreciative of folks enjoying this channel and helping us to keep this thing running, even on a Sunday fundraiser night, which is when people aren't supposed to be supporting the channel. They're supposed to be supporting the fundraiser. But still, people go over their way to support it. We are massively appreciative and thankful of that nonetheless. And thank you greatly for enjoying this channel and wanting us to keep up the work that we've been doing for years. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. And also, another thing, folks, I see some people like, man, some people are leaving, and like a little bit of people are, but this is nothing new. I'm just going to completely drop the no politics naming thing to just make it clear, because this has happened before. When we criticized Biden over the Chinese balloon flying over the United States, which we called a massive national security violation, people got pissed off back then and left. But our analysis is always going to stay the same. If we think that something's not within the interest of the country and foreign policy or national security, we just call it for what it is. So, if people don't like that, they don't like that. It is what it is, and there's not really much we can do about that. But with that, I hope that does address that the best we can. And with that, we are on to the final question of the segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the news.
All right, so before we get to our last super chat, real quick, let's go over this poll. It says, what would be the best course for the U.S. to take on Venezuela at this point? And it looks like 60% said to topple Maduro and finish the job since the money's already spent, and 28% said take the $1 billion loss and move on from Venezuela. So this one here is a little bit tricky, I'll be honest with you folks. It's a little bit tricky because I really don't believe we should get bogged down in Venezuela right now. It's a really bad time for it. But from a financial sense and also from a logistical sense, we've already sent the forces there. They've already spent the money to get them there. And they're going through all these exercises, which are costing even extra money in the area of the Caribbean. So the job that they were going down there to do was to topple Maduro. There's a $50 million bounty out on Maduro to remove him from power. And that was apparently what the U.S. was going to do down there. So now it looks like the U.S., for whatever reason, is having second thoughts about that after we've already spent the money and deployed the forces, which is a bad time to have a second thought. But I'm a little bit on the fence about this one, I'll be honest with you. I think taking a loss and moving on would have a very bad impact on our geopolitical image as the United States, because usually you don't want to look indecisive when you're dealing with killers like Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping, and killers in the figurative sense, of course, and also for Putin, you know, take it for what you will. But you don't want to look weak in the eyes of those type of people like that. So me personally, I'm a bit on the fence. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say I would be with the 60% whole in at this point. We made this into a problem we can't avoid. If we back off now, the Chinese and the Russians are going to start flooding Venezuela with weapons, and they might even train the Venezuelan army into a competent fighting force. That's something that we cannot afford. This is a situation that we should have. I'll be honest with you all. If I was president, the Venezuelan situation would have never even come up. It was a moot point that didn't have to be brought up until years later. Like if I was elected and became the president this year, this is something that I would deal with in my second term later on, 7 years from now, probably. It wasn't something that had to even be addressed right now. So this shouldn't have even been a problem. But let's say that we have to play the cards we're dealt, and for some reason, I also turned this into an issue as president, and then made this into something that we cannot avoid. We can't walk off now. We can't walk off now, or this is going to get a lot worse in 7 years if we try to deal with it in 7 years like we should have originally, when we shouldn't have touched it, which was going with the plan. So now that we've turned this into something that we cannot avoid, we have to follow through. We cannot let the Chinese and the Russians fortify Venezuela to the point that it's going to be incredibly difficult, costly, and also incredibly costly in terms of lives lost in the U.S. Armed Forces when we try and deal with this later. So now we have to deal with it. I would be with the 60% entirely because we made this into a situation we cannot avoid now, and the Russians and Chinese have made it clear they're going to hop right on this if we walk away. We have to deal with it now. There's nothing else that we can do. And if it ends up turning out badly, that's unfortunate, but we're on a track right now of events that has to happen. We cannot back off and not conduct a military action. So I would be with the 60%. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well, and it's time for us, folks, to get on into the rest of the news for the night. And it's going to be moving us on over into East Asia, as we have heard that the Chinese Coast Guard is conducting a maritime violation around the territorial waters of the Senkaku Islands. The Senkaku Islands are under the control of the state of Japan, along with pretty much every single small island leading down towards Taiwan. The People's Republic of China and the Republic of China on the island of Taiwan both claim that Japan does not own the Senkaku Islands. It's they, either the Communist Chinese or the Taiwanese, that own the Senkaku Islands. It's only the Chinese, the communist ones, that end up trying to conduct territorial violations around here. And this is after the Prime Minister of Japan made statements that they would get involved in the defense of Taiwan if the Chinese started a war over that the Chinese have started to do that once again. So, once again, we're seeing that the Chinese are conducting their low-level coercion efforts, as usual, to try and threaten our allies within the region to back down. We shouldn't really respond to this. This is a Japanese territorial water concern, so it'll be up to the Japanese to respond. But we should make it incredibly clear that we back the Japanese 100% in, one, their statements, because the United States will also defend Taiwan in the outbreak of a Chinese war, and two, if the Japanese ever decide to take actions in self-defense, because of Chinese provocations around the Senkaku Islands, the United States should also make it clear that we entirely back the state of Japan in that course of action if they deem that action to be necessary. but that is the ongoing situation right now, just north of Taiwan, due to that ongoing rising escalation. The Chinese have also now stated to their citizens that Chinese citizens who are studying abroad at university in Japan should also leave the country immediately due to the rising tensions between the two countries. China is continuing to turn this into a major ordeal, and if they want to turn it into a major ordeal, then we'll turn it into one as well. The Japanese and the United States will. But the Chinese should be smart, and they should know that running their mouths and having a slack jaw can get that jaw smacked shut. So they might want to stop doing that before they piss off the Japanese enough that they shoot at the Chinese near the islands, and then they get us all involved in a larger shooting war because the Chinese are crashing out because the Japanese made a statement that was incredibly fair. But moving on from that and into the South China Sea, we also were able to see that the Chinese and the Russians did conduct joint naval drills today near to the area of the Nimitz carrier strike group, which is also in the area within the West Philippine Sea. So there's a decent amount of navies involved here. And also some people might be like, dang, the Russians got all the way to the South China Sea? How did they do that? It wasn't really that it wasn't really that long of a distance, to be entirely honest. The Russians sailed out of Vladivostok with the Pacific Fleet down on into the area of the South China Sea, and that's how they joined up with the Chinese and conducted the naval exercise. So with that, we are going to be moving on out of the South China Sea and on out of East Asia and on into the Indian subcontinent. As we can see that the Pakistanis are also getting pretty heated, at least at the moment, with the possibility of a war coming up. According to Pakistan military chief Asim Munir, he has stated that the Pakistan army is the army of Allah. Our soldiers fight in the name of Allah. With his blessing, we destroyed our enemy much bigger than us. So it seems that they're getting pretty hyped up and ready for this whole war with Afghanistan and India. One thing I do find very interesting, though, is that the Pakistanis are getting really heavily involved in the religious side of the doctrine that they're pushing out. But what's interesting about that is that the next war is going to be against Afghanistan and India, and Afghanistan is also a majority Islamic country. So I don't really know how that works with this whole message that they're putting out in the Pakistani military right now, but it's still an interesting development nonetheless. War is going to be coming to this region at some point, probably within the next several months, probably maybe even sooner than that. It's really hard to tell because they sporadically conduct escalations, and when they conduct escalations, it escalates over a very short period of time rapidly. So we're really waiting for the next escalation at this point, and we're actually thinking that that might be very soon because of the bombings in Islamabad and New Delhi. One or the other may be destined to conduct airstrikes on the other in any given moment within the next few weeks. So we'll wait and see that if that is the case, or they may just be in incredibly high tensions because of all of the bombings that have happened in their capital cities. Moving on from that, though, and on into the Middle East, we have also been able to hear that the Talara, the Marshall Islands flag tanker that was seized by the IRGC within the Strait of Hormuz, has apparently been seized by the IRGC from helicopter, not by boat. Apparently, the IRGC flew a helicopter out to the Talara and used rappels to rappel onto the ship and then seize it that way and then sail it into territorial waters. So a little bit interesting with that. I actually, for some reason, was thinking that they conducted the seizure with boats, but apparently they did it with a helicopter. They were trying to make it as quick as possible to cut down on the amount of response time that anyone could have on the seizure. So that is a fairly interesting development in its own right. We also were able to hear inside of Qatar, a few hours later after that news came out about the Talara being seized by a helicopter from the IRGC, that two U.S. Air Force KC-135R tankers from the Al Udeid Air Base and the Italian K-6767 tanker from Kuwait were active around Qatar refueling fighter jets. It's a little unusual to see such a large refueling campaign being conducted. We have not seen any hostile action commence after this, so we do not know what assets were flying within the area to require this amount of tankers to be airborne. We do know that two B-52H Stratofortresses are currently flying into the area, but this incident happened about 7 hours ago outside of Qatar, and the B-52s were nowhere close to even being within this general area. So we do not know what they were doing in the air and what they were refueling right outside of Doha, but it was something that we were not able to see on flight radar. Moving on from that and on up into the Islamic Republic of Iran, we've also heard that they're getting desperate enough for water that cloud seeding is now beginning. Iran has begun cloud seeding to force rain as the country faces its worst drought in decades, with rainfall down 89% and major dams like Tehran's Amir Kabir nearly empty. Authorities warn water rationing and even evacuations may be needed if rain doesn't come. Cloud seeding flights started over the Urmia Lake Basin, and more are planned as reservoirs hit single-digit capacity. Not really too good for them at the moment, and I would have to say, I think they're getting really desperate at this point. Oh, by the way, they are apparently getting desperate enough that now they're claiming, folks, this is what they're claiming. The Iranian Foreign Minister, Araghchi, has said that uranium enrichment is currently not taking place in Iran, saying that Iran's enrichment facilities were destroyed when they were attacked.
Oh, that's big news right there. Honestly, how many times has Iran said that we'll keep enriching uranium, and then they say, oh, it was destroyed. Then they're like a week later, like, we'll enrich it again tomorrow, and then they're like, it was destroyed actually. It's like they're just trying to confuse everybody at this point.
I would say their enrichment abilities are certainly alive and well. We already know that because there was a load of facilities that we didn't hit, like the Pickaxe Mountain facility that clearly housed centrifuges, so their nuclear program is still going at this moment. But now apparently they've decided to just put out a straight-up lie saying that it's not happening at all, and all of their abilities were destroyed, although for months they've been swearing up and down that they were still developing a nuclear weapon. So take that for what you will. I would be honest with y'all, the Iranians are still developing nuclear weaponry, and if we had any sense, we would go back in and we would finish the job that we started and completely destroy Iran's abilities to create any nuclear weaponry within their country. Also, on top of that, a lot of people are continuing to talk about the United States and its lack of action on the seizure of the Marshall Islands flag tanker Talara within the Strait of Hormuz. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. So now the U.S. is saying that Iran's seizing of the oil tanker violated international law. However, apparently no action is being taken to deal with the situation by the United States. And what are your thoughts? 59% said the U.S. is being weak on this one, while 19% said that works. Let's just wait and see what happens in the future. And 12% said it's not worth responding to. So the Marshall Islands is highly aligned with the United States. We even have an agreement with them to defend them in certain instances. So this is an interesting position to take, that the U.S. is kind of going to let this sort of be swept under the rug a little bit, it sounds like. We did not get any commitments by CENTCOM to take action against Iran for this issue, but we are seeing what appears to be B-52 Stratofortresses go into the region tonight. So maybe they're simply not wanting to broadcast the action that's going to be taken against Iran. That could be possible. We did hear that Iran's warning of war in December, so it could be maybe the CENTCOM is being a little bit more on the quiet side about what they're going to do about it, which is generally what I would tend to lean toward, actually. So I say I'm with 18%. Let's wait and see, and I guess that statement works for now, and we'll see if Iran gets glassed over this issue. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to be with the 18% as well. We'll have to wait and see. I would say that considering that this happened 3 days ago and we haven't made really any strong statements on our position yet, that is leaning more towards into the camp of being weak. Really, we should have had a response ready for this within 24 hours. It's 72 hours later now, and we still don't have a major response. We just have some officials from the Department of State going, that's clearly illegal, and that's it. And no actual response at a higher level like the Secretary of State or the President. But we'll, of course, have to wait and see if there's going to be a larger response. So I would have to be with the 18 to 19% at the moment that are saying that it works, and we'll just wait and see. Because who knows, they might just be working slowly at this point. You know, they got their hands full with, bombing or not bombing Venezuela, so I'm sure they're all focused on that right now. But hopefully they'll eventually get around to the effective blockade that's now been started in the Strait of Hormuz because of the seizure of this vessel. Hopefully we'll get around to that eventually because, what's more important, dealing with some dude who eats empanadas and is stupid sitting in some South American country, or dealing with a nation that just stopped most oil shipments in and out of the Middle East, which is one of the largest oil producers within the globe. And I would feel like this one is a bigger issue, and we should be kind of focusing our attention on this a little bit quicker. But, we'll just wait and see. Anyways, moving on from that, and on up into Lebanon, we also saw a massive fire and explosion break out in Lebanon. Apparently not from an Israeli airstrike, it just happened. So here's the clip.
Allahu Akbar. شوف الهيدا
Man, we know that this has to be Syria or Lebanon because the catchphrase was said. We know that this clip is from that area. Man, that's like the watermark of the region, like of Lebanon and Syria. If you hear that in the clip, 100% chance it's from Syria or Lebanon, one or the other.
Honestly, whoa, a snack bar. I'm telling you, Lebanon's getting burned up at this point. That's quite tremendous. I wonder what caused that. By the way, it was only we heard what caused it in the first place. I'm curious.
I wonder. We'll have to try and get an answer as to why that explosion happened, but Lebanon is just prone to blowing up a lot over the past decade or so. So for unknown reasons, like sometimes it's just not even anyone blowing them up. It's just they just happen to blow up. So we'll just have to see what's happening in Lebanon. I'm sure we'll get an answer in a couple of days as to what that was, but apparently it wasn't an Israeli airstrike. But if you think that Israeli airstrikes are going to be reducing anytime soon, you would be sorely mistaken. The Israelis apparently are already making it clear by the Chief of Staff, Eyal Zamir, that we must be prepared for a rapid transition to a broad offensive to seize territory in the Gaza Strip on the other side of the Yellow Line. The Yellow Line is currently where Israeli forces are right now, and the Yellow Line is basically in the very fringe perimeters of the Gaza Strip. Israeli forces are still technically within the Gaza Strip, but a large part of the area of Han Yunis, Rafah, and Gaza City have all been completely cleared of any Israeli presence and are now under the control of the transitional government that is supposed to be removing Hamas from any control of the Strip. Now the Israelis are already preparing, after we got an effective peace treaty in place between Hamas and the Israelis, or generally a ceasefire is what this more so was. The Israelis are already preparing at this point to start another offensive to reoccupy the Gaza Strip again. So that is happening at the moment, and we're assuming that the Israelis may kick that off within the next couple of months from this point. It's incredibly clear that the situation has not been resolved within the Gaza Strip, and the Israelis are also adamant on once again starting another offensive within the Gaza Strip. So, with that in mind, folks, once again, nothing's really too surprising there. But moving on from that and on out of the Middle East, it is time for us to get on up into Ukraine and all of the actions that have been happening on the front lines in the war in Ukraine. So moving us on into that news, we were able to hear that President Zelensky today announced a major development with the Republic of France, as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is expected to seal deals with France on a supply of air defense capabilities, warplanes, and missiles, seeking to bolster the army's long-term capacity to fight Russia's ongoing invasion. This will generally...
Yeah, Maduro said, we don't want a world war. However, and then he said, let's arm Ukraine to the teeth, dang it. Let's arm them to the teeth. Honestly, good for France, though. Like, sometimes you think, oh, France is kind of like a little bit on the fence about supporting Ukraine. One day they're on the good side of Ukraine. The next day they're kind of like waffling a little bit. But it looks like this time France has come through once again. So I'm glad to see that.
And I would have to say, I'm quite glad to see that as well. So from what we're assuming, we believe that the French are going to be providing SAMP-Ts, which are the air defense systems to Ukraine, along with more Mirage 2000s, Mika EMs, and Magic 2s for the missiles that they would provide. So generally a pretty decent package. It's more so revolving around air interdiction and air defense, which is once again the strong point that the Ukrainians are working on, trying to build up so that way they can pretty much stop Russian attacks from having any real impact on the home front inside of Ukraine. Moving on from that and on into our location unknowns, we have also been able to hear significant developments within the location unknowns. First, we were able to see Ukraine launching their brand new BARS missiles. You know, the Ukrainians are dropping bars and smashing cars, and it really is something impressive to see the launch of these brand new BARS missiles. Look at them go.
Rumor has it Ukraine's going to lay down 18 bars on the Russians.
Man, that goes hard. Man, look, but there they go. Rocket-assisted takeoffs.
Wait until they send in 808 rockets.
Man, honestly, That's going to be wild. Also, by the way, this is the BARS missile, just to refresh everyone's memory, because I actually didn't know what the BARS looked like until I pulled it up again today, because it's been a long time ever since we covered it. And it's also believed that there's another iteration of the BARS that looks kind of like that, but we're not exactly sure about that. This is the one that we know that the Ukrainians announced as the BARS missile. This was covered on multiple statements, including that of United 24's. And so this is what we're believing is the BARS missile. This missile has a range of 800 kilometers, which is about 600 miles, and can hit just about anything and everything within the Russian Federation's western regions. So, a fairly interesting missile to see, and hopefully landing some significant hits within the Russian Federation. And moving on from that and on into our next clip, we also saw a Russian donkey being used for logistics transport.
Что за аппарат? Сколько
Oh
лошадей?
man, a real donkey.
120-ки, да, Тащ?
Man, look at that.
Охуеть, бля.
Ну и что, он нормально справляется, не тяжело ему?
Honestly, the guy filming sounds like a donkey himself. I wish you turned the camera around. I'd like to see what this guy looks like.
Bro, he looks like Lavrov, man. He's ooh, man. But, oh man. But moving on from that clip and on into our next one, we also got to see a very interesting clip of a Ukrainian soldier attempting to defend the car that they were using against a Russian drone, but he was not successful. He still ended up dodging the drone though by a couple of feet, which is pretty nice to see. And we'll have to mute that clip, actually. I just heard copyrighted music in there. Had a little keen ear for that, but we can see him making a run for it. And the drone hits the truck, and he was missed by feet. Fairly lucky that he got right out of the way just in time.
I would say very lucky right there. You can tell he knows he's lucky too. He had to go take a breather off on the side.
Man, honestly, he was like, dang, I was lucky. And he was incredibly lucky. We also got to see the Russian casualty report over the past 24 hours. And Miss Disa, keeper of the record, stated that...
We got two more Bobcats too.
It's
Look at that.
4,000!
We're now at 4,000 right there. Honestly, that was pretty quick actually. Like it seems like the rate of Bobcat losses have gone through the roof in the last few days alone. But 4,000, I never thought I'd see 4,000 this quick. That is impressive right there. A good way to round out a Sunday night fundraiser. I'm telling you.
Man, I'll be honest with you respectfully. That is incredibly good to see. And we were able to hear from Miss DC, keeper of the records, that troop losses are on the low end, but the average stays above 1,000. 409 drones is the 20th highest daily loss of the war, at least for the drones, and plus 2 Bobcats makes 4,000 special equipment lost over the course of the war, which is incredibly great to see. We are, of course, going to be making sure to tell you all something a little bit big about those numbers, as 860 Russian soldiers have been wounded and killed, along with 3 APCs, 68 supply trucks, 3 main battle tanks, 26 artillery pieces, 409 drones, 2 cruise missiles, well, 2 MLRSs, correction there, and 2 Bobcat skid steers. The losses were pretty decent today, but if you didn't believe me in saying that the losses are great, you ought to believe the Russian government, because up in Moscow, they've made it incredibly clear that they're desperate for manpower. This was a Telegram post put out today by the Russian Ministry of Defense. An honest 5.5 million rubles from the Russian Ministry of Defense. That's equivalent to about $68,000 as a sign-on bonus. Only for those who are not used to sitting still, 3 million rubles in hand immediately and 5.5 million rubles for the first year of service. Units will be formed in the Moscow region based at CSP Vityaz. We buy the ticket, train, plane, and bus, organize accommodation in the barracks for the duration of the contract. A team of specialists supervises and consults on all issues. We accept in all respects. Payment is also 3 million rubles. Requirements: age from 18 to 64. So basic.
Oh my God.
Oh man, and also no disability and no serious chronic diseases. Only a passport is required for registration.
Notice they didn't say you couldn't be an alcoholic. Notice they didn't say that. And they said they accept in all respects. Honestly, though, it's an interesting thing that Russia's doing here, because they know, or at least they should know, because they're the ones fighting the war, that their soldiers only last about 2 weeks on the front lines. So even if they pay out a sign-on bonus, that sign-on bonus, I'm sure the Russians will probably delay that in some form or another, so that way they don't have to actually pay it out. It's not going to be, let's say, kept by the individual that got the sign-on bonus, because the individual that got it probably won't be around longer than 2 weeks on the front lines with the way Russia's fighting right now. So honestly, this is just literally what you call the hook. And it looks like most Russians are taking the sinker at this point, because they're going down with the ship.
This is absolutely insane that they would even offer this, because the reality is, folks, none of these Russians that accept or sign a contract are ever going to see any of that money. They're going to get killed in Ukraine very quickly. And honestly, they'll probably get killed so quickly the Russians won't even have time to pay them out at all on any of this. So this is a pretty cheap deal for the Russian government, but a pretty costly one for those who may be gullible enough to take such an offer. We also were able to see that icy conditions today have led to Alabama-style driving conditions on the streets of Moscow. Take a gander.
Oh, Bliad.
Oh,
What was in the back of that truck? You spoke like that.
oh my God.
Отойдите, блин!
Momentum. Oh, man. Oh, that's awful.
Выходите из машины.
Terrible. Are you okay? Oh, look, they're okay. They were fine.
Давайте, давайте.
It's like, y'all might want to get out of the car because y'all about to get pancaked by another truck, probably.
Блин. Выходите. Все нормально, все, ничего не случилось, все нормально. Все нормально.
At least they were
всё
driving a
нормально.
nice, well-built car at least.
Братан, можешь
Oh
выйти?
my God,
Oh, wow.
dude.
Damn, dude, the truck got the worst of it. I thought the truck was going to be okay.
Dude, you just said a well-made car. This is the non-well-made truck. I mean, my God, the cab is gone.
Братан, можешь выйти? Можешь выйти? Выходи!
Is that guy sticking his head through the windshield? What the
Yeah,
hell?
he
Like,
is.
Honestly, now in all seriousness, I know, like, laughing on this, I'm glad the guy's okay because these are innocent civilians, by the way. But I mean, that's a bit of a feat that he survived that like this. He's literally just standing in the cab with his head. He looks fine, like he's not even bleeding or anything. He's just standing there in the cab, looking out the front. That's kind of remarkable, actually.
Yes, from all we know, nobody died in this pileup, which is actually kind of miraculous. But that is really wild. I mean, the guy, he's literally just chilling there. I mean, he's just legitimately chilling. So apparently there's just a small little cubby that did not get crushed, and he's in it. So, very lucky guy, honestly. He could have been killed in that crash. But also, the reason why I'm pointing this out, folks, it's a little bit wild to see that there is this sort of an incident happening, like a major pileup like this, in Moscow, which is heavily used to inclement weather conditions in the winter, and also a lot of these drivers are incredibly familiar with that as well. So a little bit interesting to see such a major pileup like this happen, considering that everyone in the country and the Russian government is incredibly familiarized with tougher, colder winter conditions like they're seeing in Moscow right
Выйти!
now.
Можешь выйти? Выходи! Можешь, не сможешь выйти? Подойди!
And he's fine. I mean, he's just hanging out up there.
Kind of crazy that generally everybody seems like they're fine in this crash, even though it's like horrific. Oh, look at this. Damn, how'd that car take that well? I mean, whatever. I mean, this beater right here took that thing pretty good, actually. Like, it barely got dented by that massive truck.
Honestly, I mean, that is, honestly, that whole thing was crazy. Luckily, no one died in it, because they're citizens, of course. We have nothing against the Russian citizenry. But still, absolutely crazy that that's happening in normal winter conditions around Moscow. Moving on from that, though, and out of Moscow, it's now time for us to move on back into Ukraine and our frontline footage. And we were able to see near to the area of Lyman that the Russians were getting hit, as usual, by the Signum unit. And so, here's the clip. And Al Rose threw in 333, and we are $27 from the fundraiser goal.
My God, look at that. 333 from Hal Rose coming in right there. I'm telling you, thank you very much, Hal, for that 333. Thank you very much.
Oh, man, I'm telling you, Jack, it's crazy. Look, if a kid's got to ask who the fundraiser is, and your kid doesn't know what they're, or anyway. Well, look, it's Hal Rose. He's legendary. But anyways, man, take a look at
We are
this.
so close to goal. We're only about $30, a little under $30 away from the goal. $27. Tom Exman did the math, thankfully. And Tom said 27 to goal. So we are so close. We are very close to goal right now. It's so close to goal. Some people say it's never been closer to goal. And Danny B was the one to do it. We have hit the goal. Hey, Chaka Eagle! We smashed that goal. Let's go, Jack. Come on, man. I mean, damn. I mean, how do you smash the goal like this? Oh my God, they hit the goal. Oh, Jack, whoa!
Whoa, Jack, they hit the goal! Whoa, that's absolutely incredible, truly incredible. Whoa, and I gotta say, an absolutely giant thank you to everyone who's been supporting this fundraiser. It's unbelievable to think that we have hit another fundraiser goal 2 hours into this show. And I gotta congratulate you all greatly, all the folks that we were able to call out, and all the folks we aren't able to call out, because each and every single one of y'all have come together to once again make it possible for the Lee Spring Army to continue to support American and Western interests around the world every single weekend, and to also ensure that the Lee Spring Army will never truly die. So a humongous thanks to y'all once again for seeing that Nova Ukraine will be fundraised for once again, and will continue to help save lives inside of Ukraine. And moving us on down into the area of the Pokrovsk battlefield, we've also been able to see that an attempted Russian mechanized assault in the Dobropilia direction was also stopped today. Oh, and they hit one right there. This defensive action, was conducted by the 132nd Battalion of the Ukrainian Armed Forces.
And it was the 132nd smashing of the Russians, too. They're getting smashed a lot these days, in the wrong way.
Man, hey, yo. Also, we saw the Phoenix unit targeting and hitting Russian logistics as well, like this ATV and trailer.
Yeah, that's what they do on, Pumpkin Patch Day and stuff like that. Like, they bring out the little ATV in the trailer and, haul them around the pumpkin patch and stuff and let them enjoy the pumpkins and everything like that. And in a nice Halloween and stuff like that. But it turns out that the Russians got a scary Halloween surprise. They got a drone right at them. That's something.
Man, it really is. Corn Pop is a bad dude, and he ran a bunch of bad boys. Well, that's the end of that clip right there, but very nice to see. Moving on from that and on out of the battlefield of Pokrovsk, it's now time for us to return back to Kyiv to cover the speech from the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, here on this very day of the war. So, without further ado, here's the speech. Peach!
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці. Жодного дня ми не втрачаємо для нашої держави. Вже на сьогодні підготували домовленість з Грецією по газу для України. Це буде ще один напрямок постачання газу, щоб убезпечити максимально на зиму маршрути імпорту газу для України. Вже є у нас домовленості про фінансування імпорту газу, і ми закриємо потребу майже 2 мільярди євро на імпорт газу, щоб компенсувати втрати українського видобутку через російський удар. Уряд України спрямував кошти на фінансування імпорту, допомагають наші європейські партнери, європейські банки під гарантії Єврокомісії, допомагають також українські банки, допомагає Норвегія, триває активна робота із американськими партнерами, повне фінансування буде. Ми робимо широкі можливості для постачання зимою, зокрема через наших польських партнерів, і активно працюємо з Азербайджаном і дуже розраховуємо на довгострокові контракти. Ми про це говорили нещодавно з президентом. Історичну угоду ми підготували також з Францією. Буде значне посилення нашої бойової авіації, нашого захисту неба, наших інших оборонних спроможностей. За графіком візиту це буде в понеділок. Хороший зміст візиту – це те, що дійсно допомагає Україні захищатись і досягати наших цілей, наших завдань. Вівторок давно готували, зараз можемо вже сказати, що буде результативним візит в Іспанію. Ще одна сильна країна, яка приєдналася до партнерів у тих ініціативах, що реально нам допомагають. Найголовніші пріоритети для нас сьогодні – це ППО, системи, ракети ППО. І ми після кожного російського удару забезпечуємо відновлення наших сил. Це не просто, але ми це робимо. Також наша стійкість і наша підготовка до зими. І, звісно, безумовно, фронт. І, звісно, безумовно, дипломатія. Ми працюємо, щоб був ще один старт перемовин, щоб все ж таки була перспектива закінчення цієї війни. І також розраховуємо на відновлення обмінів. Багато зустрічей, перемовин, дзвінків. Зараз, заради цього. Я дякую всім, хто нам допомагає. Я дякую всім, хто з нами, хто з Україною, з українським народом. Слава Україні!
And Hiram Slava.
And
You
with
know,
that,
honestly, Zelensky's looking very, very train logged in that video right there. Honestly, he looked like I did when I rode the train that one time we did it. I think it was last year, mid-year, from Los Angeles to Seattle on the Amtrak thing. The picture is so bad. I actually took a picture to document how bad I was looking. I looked like 3 or 4 times worse than Zelensky, and I won't even show it to anybody. It looks so bad. It's horrific. But he has the same look, sort of like a little bit lesser than I did, being train logged, which is tough. Honestly, I know how he's feeling.
and man, Zelensky was on that train. He was going, "Hello, everyone. I am on the Coast Starlight. I am very sick. I cannot take this much longer. Please get me off this train. I need a helicopter or a car or something. I do not need a train. I need a ride." But beyond that, that is the end of the speech from the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, and it is time for us to move on into the second segment of this stream where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. And while we do have a small number of super chats to continue to get to here in this segment, we are going to be getting to a humongous number of live chats. Tonight is the Sunday night fundraiser, and generally by design, we are not supposed to be getting any super chats to address. We're supposed to be able to answer questions from the chat that anyone wants to throw in free of charge, because this channel is not a pay-to-play sort of a system. You can throw in questions in the chat and expect to have them answered if we have the ability to, and on Sunday night we always have the ability to. And so, without further ado, before we get on into those questions, Matthew, do we have any more top donors to shout out in the meantime before we get on into those questions?
Oh, and do we have top donors? We do have some more top donors, and let's call them out right now. We had a $333 donation come in from Hal Rose to the fundraiser, and a massive one right there. And a huge shout out to Hal for making it very possible tonight for us to go right over the fundraiser goal right there. And also a big shout out to Nicholas Conder for putting in a $250 donation. Huge shout out to Nicholas for also a massive donation. And a huge shout out to Tom S., who put in a $125, along with Danny B., who threw in a $50, and Samuel Sizamonski, who threw in a $50 as well. And so far, I believe that is our top donors since the last time we called them off. But like I said last time, we have to give a big shout out to all the folks that threw in fundraiser amounts under $50, because it is all those that also added up to get us up to $2,600 raised right now. And the LSA has never missed a fundraising goal throughout the many years that we've been running the channel, and it is all thanks to y'all. And so far, we are somewhere over $1.6 million at least raised for Ukrainian charities. Fantastic work, and a huge shout out to the LSA once again. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to say a humongous shout out and thanks to every single person who has been supporting these fundraisers for years. Y'all have continued to help in supporting American and Western interests around the globe, and primarily, most of our fundraisers help out in the endless battle that is going on inside of Ukraine against the Russian Federation and generally the Axis powers. And I've got to thank y'all so much once again for hitting another fundraiser goal tonight and continuing to show the world that the Lee Spring Army will always be there in support of American and Western interests and supporting the right side in the fight whenever the fight's happening. So a humongous thanks to all of y'all so much once again, the folks we were able to call off and the folks we cannot call off, because each and every single one of y'all have come together once again to make it possible for us to say, long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die. And so with that, it's time for us to get on into the questions. So with that, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping right back into our questions, we do have some super chats remaining, and then of course we will get to all of our live chat questions that we have right now in the spreadsheet, and maybe some more too. We might get some more as well, but also a big shout out to none other than Bradley Barrows, who threw in a $20 super chat, and thank you very much, Bradley, for that support once again. And he said, are you familiar with the 28th Virginia Infantry Regiment battle flag on display at the capital of the state of Minnesota?
And I do not. Let's see, the 28th Regiment, let's see, battle flag, Minnesota. Let me type that in. Maybe we can find it that way. The 28th Virginia battle flag. Oh, it's one of the Confederate battle flags that belonged to the 28th Virginia Infantry Regiment and was captured by the 1st Minnesota Infantry Regiment during the Battle of Gettysburg. What part of the battle was it captured at? Let's see, capture, let's see, this would have been during, let's see here, was ordered to attack the flank of the Confederate troops, and this would have been during the battle. It looks like it was during the Battle of Cemetery Ridge that the capture of this flag took place. So this is actually the flag that's inside of let's see, the state's capital at Minnesota, which I believe the state capital of Minnesota, which unfortunately I'm going to have to strain my brain here, is in Minneapolis or it's in St. Paul. It's in one of the Twin Cities. Which one is? Let's see, state capital. Let me just put that in really quickly. State Capitol building. It is in Minneapolis, right here. So this is actually where the flag is. This was actually captured by the 1st Minnesota during the Battle of Gettysburg at the Battle of Cemetery Ridge. And you can actually see a picture here of Marshal Sherman, Private Marshal Sherman, posing in front of the flag after they captured it post Battle of Gettysburg, which is really interesting. Actually, that's really cool to know. And what a battle trophy! I actually haven't heard of a lot of battle trophies from the Battle of Gettysburg being out there in the world at large. So that's really cool to know that y'all actually have one in the state capital in Minnesota. That is actually really cool. And also on top of that, that is very interesting that their battle flag was not the bloodstained flag, which was usually the common battle flag, I believe, during that period from 1863 onwards. That is actually the one that a lot of people say isn't even a real battle flag that didn't exist, which generally, from what I know, it was wildly rare, and this would actually be generally considered the naval jack of the Confederacy more so than another battle flag. So pretty interesting with that. And thank you for the support and sharing that with us, because I actually didn't know of really any battle trophies that existed from the Battle of Gettysburg. This is the first one that I know about, thanks to you.
Indeed. And also, by the way, I don't mean to jump away from your super chat, Bradley. And once again, thank you very much for that support. But I got some breaking news right now. I haven't seen anybody talk about this, but I am seeing what appears to be a C-17 Globemaster squawking 7700 over Qatar right now, which means a general emergency. Check this out on Flight Radar 24, Enforcer. This is literally happening right this second. It's Moose 67. That's the code name right now. They're squawking an emergency, and it looks like I think they're trying to come back in for a landing. It appears like they might have actually. It's Moose. It's up their top, number 1 tracked. There it is. I think it maybe just turned off his transponders. The reason why it's not popping up, but yeah, you see it squawking 7700 right now. So I don't know what's going on with that thing, but it's having a bit of a issue over Qatar right now.
It probably is a technical issue, considering that it's happening over to Qatar, so it could be a failure of flight control systems, the engines, or something along those lines. But hopefully the aircraft gets down safely. It looks like it's going for the let's see, the Al Udeid Air Base. Is looking like it's going to just return right back there after taking off. So that's fairly interesting. But we'll have to wait and see exactly why it's declared a general distress. At least here in a little bit, if we ever get any information about that at all. So with that, I hope that is addressed well. Thank you for sharing that breaking news, by the way. Very interesting to see. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, there's a lot of military movements happening tonight, like around the world from the U.S. Air Force. We've seen, I'm trying to see here some more as well. There's a lot. There's some happening in Japan. There's some happening in Al Udeid. There's a lot happening around the world. They're jumping on and off Flight Radar 24 because they keep on turning off their transponders as they become visible. So you don't get to see them for very long, but it seems like a lot of movements. We're seeing the B-52s apparently heading to Egypt from Spain. We're seeing the movements inside of Japan as well. So most of it's probably routine, but the ones that don't seem to be routine are the ones heading to the Middle East. I see some people saying that Qatar is having an air show. What time is it in Qatar? Let's check that out real quick. Time in Qatar or Qatar. It's 8:11 a.m. in the morning, so it's still a little bit early in the morning in Qatar right now. So, are they having an air show? Let's see here. Qatar air show. Let's put this one to rest. So, there is a World Military Parachuting Championship held in Doha from November the 13th through the 23rd, but it's not really an air show necessarily. It's more like a parachuting championship. So some people were being very, very facetious about that earlier. It's not an air show. It's apparently something completely different. So fascinating with that. So very interesting.
Man, this guy right here is absolutely tweaking. I mean, look at this flight path.
Yeah, he could just be spastic.
Man, this guy right here, man, he's getting navigation instructions from Google Maps. That's why it looks like this, man. Left, right, up, down, top, center. I gotta say, folks, I just don't count on navs anymore. I feel like they don't really give you the best instructions, but still. With that, I hope we were able to address that breaking news fairly well and also put to rest that it is not an air show. And I also saw someone say Dubai air show. Well, Dubai's like 400 miles away, so if it would be really hard for spectators at the Dubai air show to be able to watch a C-17 400 miles away over Doha. So I'm having a feeling that that might be a little bit of a rough one. And also, why in the world is everyone looking at this Japan Airlines flight over Tokyo? Why is
I
this
don't
so
know.
interesting?
Is it foul weather or something?
I don't know. It's going to go land at the Narita Airport, which is a great airport, folks. Really interesting history about it. The locals here in Japan actually started conducting terrorist attacks against the government of Japan for trying to build this airport back when they were trying to build it in the 60s and 70s. And it took, I think, all the way up until the 90s for the government to actually build the Narita Airport. So an interesting story about that, because a lot of people don't really associate Japan with domestic or civil unrest, or terrorist incidents for that matter. But this was actually a very huge battleground for that in Japan. You can still see that to this day, because in the middle of the Narita Airport, there are farms in the middle of the active airport. And the people still live at these farms, and they're still operational farms. And this is a holdover from all of the pretty much wars that were fought between the locals and the Japanese government about building this international airport. There's a shrine right here, literally at the end of 34 right. And I think all the way up here, there's some sort of a crazy antenna. Well, there's an antenna that's around here somewhere. And I'm trying to see if I can find it and show it to y'all. Maybe it's this. No, it's not that. It's not that, unfortunately. Oh man, I don't think I'll be able to find it. I think it'll be out of reach for me, but still, it's an absolutely wild thing, this airport and the story behind it. There's some documentaries about it on YouTube, and every single one of them is well made and wildly interesting about the story of the Narita Airport. But anyways, with that, I hope that addresses that little rabbit hole, interestingly enough. And with that, it is time for us to move on and into the next one.
All right, so our next one here goes to Old Warrior Fella. And Old Warrior puts in a $20 super chat. And thank you very much, good sir, for the support once again. And we do appreciate that. And Old Warrior said, whatever happened to the Nigeria story? That was big for a minute. And I've been following the saga of the Akhmat commander Api Aladoniv. Aladoniv or something like that. He said he jacked up some Russian bloggers and is looking more and more like Kadyrov's successor.
And I thank you for the support. And generally, the Nigeria story was a big thing for a little bit because it was made into a big thing. But not to sound crass, but genocides in Africa is like, it's like the wind blowing here in America. It happens about every day somewhere or another
Still
within
horrible,
Africa.
though. It's still really bad.
Yeah, it's horrible, but at the same time, it doesn't really hit the radar too much because those are happening everywhere. Like they don't tell you about the endless gang wars, massacres, and genocides that happen daily in Liberia because it's such a fact of life in Liberia. It doesn't even get any coverage at all, and also all of the others that are very similar to that happen in places like Mali or Burkina Faso or Niger or Chad or any countries like that, or even Sudan, where there's a load of massacres happening that are even larger scale than the ones in Nigeria. So generally, I wouldn't be able to give you a lot of updates because this region of Saharan or sub-Saharan Africa is such an unstable and warlike region. Most of those tragedies just kind of all meld together and fly right over our radar. So unfortunately, don't really have a lot of information to be able to tell on that because it just doesn't really cross our radar enough. And also on top of that, it's really hard to follow because people's ability to connect to the internet in these regions as well is wildly low. And so very little information gets out unless if it's from a traditional news source. And also a lot of traditional news sources don't really want to cover it either because it's so dangerous to even get into these regions and try and get any news out of them. So we don't really have a huge amount of updates from that area at the moment, unfortunately. But at the same time, I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, but we just don't have any news on that. And also, another thing that I have to say, just to add this in as well, since we're talking about no news, we also are not covering the news of what's going on in Mexico. It appears to be a domestic political matter from what we can tell, and so we're giving it a wide berth and staying completely clear of it. So if you're expecting us to talk about the Mexican news here on the channel, unfortunately, we are not, because it appears to be a political matter, a domestic political matter inside of Mexico. But with that, I hope that is addressed it the best we can. A huge thanks to you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next support here goes to none other than Chef Danny B. And Chef Danny puts in a $20 support. And thank you very much, good sir, for that support once again. And also, it's good to see you. And he said, good evening, Enforcers. Chef Danny here. And a great stream today. And here is some for y'all, since y'all pretty much work for free on Sundays, out of the goodness of your hearts. And LT, LSA. And thank you very much, Danny, for that appreciation right there. We do work on Sundays totally for free. And we've done that for literally years at this point. And honestly, it's a privilege to do it. The Sunday Night Fundraiser stream is a hallmark of the Enforcer channel, and we've really done some really big numbers here on the channel thanks to the LSA with these fundraisers on Sunday. So not many other channels can say they've done that consistently every single week for years on end. Not every channel can say that, so we're very proud of it. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I thank you massively for the support, Danny B. And to put it into perspective, Matthew, we have worked something along the lines of 160 days for free on Sundays. That's how many Sundays we've done in the number of fundraisers. And it's really crazy to think about that because, you know, a lot of people being told they're going to work 150 days for free with no pay over the course of about 3.5 to 4 years. Most people would say absolutely not. But as I would have to agree with Matthew, I'm absolutely honored that we get to get on air and cover the news for a 6th day of the week. And not only that, support the folks around the world that we're actually covering the news on. I got to thank you massively for the support and the kind words, Chef Danny B, because folks like you help this channel to keep on running and make this thing possible for us. I got to thank you massively. And also on top of that, we don't even expect to get any super chat support on Sundays, but generally we're never supposed to. We designed it to where we can't make a cent on Sundays, but YouTube has made a loophole and people are taking advantage of that. And regardless or not, we still greatly appreciate everyone for supporting us on Sundays, because if it wasn't for folks like y'all who were supporting us day in and day out every single week, we wouldn't be able to do this as our full-time job and really focus all of our attention, time, and effort onto this to be able to cover it. So humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next super chat goes to none other than Duncan VR. And Duncan puts in a 15 Australian. And thank you very much, Duncan, for that support once again, all the way from Australia. And he said, Baba moo woof, meow. It's time for the marmot. Bring him out. Bring him out.
Bring out the marmot? Why? Bring out the marmot. That is one hell of a request right there. Bring him out? Well, we can. Oh, hello there. Oh, I'm sorry, everyone. That's the photorealistic marmot. That's not the real. Hang on, everyone. Let me get that off screen. Let me go get the real one.
Governor.
Wait, is that the marmot? Is that the marmot we're hearing?
Oh, hello there, Governor. It's been a long time no see. Hello there, Governor. How you doing? It's been a long time. Look at him. He said, I want a painting. I'm a static figure. I want a painting, and I'm right here staring at you with one eye. Very big eye. You know, he's sitting here looking around with that nose and stuff. You know, spitting a little blood. Not spitting bars, but spitting blood. He's hardcore. He's more gangster than the gangsters. He said he walks in the streets of London. He said, but he moved from the streets of London because now he sells rock in posh Kensington. He moved to Kensington and sells rock. Show the product. Show the product. There it is right there. Look at that. The finest quality. I keep my paw on it to make sure it's nice and protected. Look at that. Nobody's getting the rock. There's always a customer nearby, though, that wants some rock. Show the customer. That's the product.
I thought you said
There's
the
the
rock.
customer.
You said the rock though. You said
Wait,
there's always a rock nearby that wants. So I was like, the rock. I was like, what? And then I zoomed back in.
Hey, wait, hey, show the customer. Show the customer, Governor. There he is. Look at him. Look at him. He's the customer down there with 8 legs. The customer. Look at him. So cute, that customer. He's not so cute though when he starts spitting that vitriol. That hot dog man. Hey, he puts a glizzy in his mouth and all of a sudden he's nasty. But tell us more.
Aw, man, I've completely abandoned Ukraine. Aw, man, I remember I used to tell people that I loved Ukraine, but then I got a hold of Mr. Marmot's rock and I completely forgot about it and went on to rapper beefs. Aw, man, my life is misery. Help me to get a desk and a chair and a trip to DC. Aw, man.
Wake up. They say he wants to cover that rapper beef, but actually what he wants to really do is he wants to have some of that rapper beef. He said, "Have some of that
Oh,
beef." He said, he said, "What boy?" He said, "You know, he's moving on from glizzies and he's moving on to rapper beef." He said, he said, his name Bubba. He said, sir, is your name Bubba, sir? You come all the way from across the pond, yeah? He come across the pond. He say hello to the fly. He said, hey, governor. He said, hello there."
Aw, man, he's right. The fly went from blowing bubbles to blowing bubba. It's a big move in the world. And also, the rappers are great. They're wonderful. I really like to, I have to say that in my opinion, it's better than Argentine beef. Aw, man.
Oh
But
man, Hot Dog Man said, Hot Dog Man said, "I don't understand why there's a beef price affordability crisis." He said, "I don't understand why there's a crisis. You can get the beef for free at the truck stop on the weekend. That's why I've usually gotten it."
man, honestly, man, when you think about it, the price of meat in this country is rising higher and higher just about every single week. But not for Hot Dog Man. He always got his meat for free, and he still gets it for free. Like, really, he's on that grind, that beef grind, as they call it. But still, we absolutely love the Marmot and the Fly segment. An absolutely incredible segment. And I got to say a huge thanks to you for the support, Duncan VR, and allowing us to have a little bit of a moment with Alan the Marmot and the Fly. So a humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, it's time for us to move on and into the next one.
Honestly, I was wilding out on the Marmot tonight. Like the Marmot really went wild tonight. Honestly, some people were saying, "What the hell did I come back to?" And I can hear the trauma through the chat. This is the first time I've ever heard like trauma through a chat like that. You've come back to, good sir, a British marmot on a painting that doesn't really look like a marmot, but we call him a marmot anyway. That's Alan. But anyways, moving on to our next super chat. This one goes to Kevin Hansen, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Kevin, for that $10 support right there. And we do appreciate that. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I thank you greatly for the support as well, because you're helping this channel to keep on rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Point of Guinness, who puts in a 10. And Point of Guinness said, "Nice going and keep it up, good guys. And good work, guys."
And thank you so much for the support, and thank you for saying that we're doing well and to keep it going, because we will keep it going. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again for the support. I hope that has addressed that well, and we're on to the next one.
And we also have a $10 support from Stanley So Manly. Stanley is manly. He said, "Mafia versus cartel. Who wins?"
That's a good question. And I'd have to say, I don't know. I'd have to say the court's out on that one for now. Or the jury's out on that. That's the real saying right there. Or the prosecutor's out. Whichever one you want to go with. Or the jury's been threatened enough that they're not out. Like, well, they're out. Put it one way or the other. But with that, I hope that is addressed it the best we can. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on rolling. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to Just the Dab, who puts in a 2 and said, "Take a look at Theo Franken's first tweet on November 2nd. And who is that, by the way?
Theo Franken? Is that like a Frankenstein version of, like, let's see. Oh, he's the defense minister of Belgium. He's the defense minister of Belgium.
What do you say on November the 2nd?
November the 2nd. I have to scroll back to find it. I mean, geez, this guy's tweeting a lot here. Let's go find this here, eh? Let's go find this here, eh? Let's find it, eh? Let's see. Oh, here we are. Let's see. I'm not finding one on November 2nd. I see one on the 1st. I see one on the 5th. Let me scroll down a little bit more. Maybe there's one on the 2nd. I'm just not seeing it here. Maybe it's out of order. Maybe it's out of order. Oh, let's see here. Let's see. Oh, he was talking about the drones, and how to counter them. Well, it's a copyrighted clip from a Belgian news agency, so unfortunately I would have to watch it, which is about 2 minutes long, and also he's speaking in Belgian, so that also complicates matters a little bit farther. But still, he is talking about how Belgium will hopefully eventually be able to try and shoot down the drones, but that probably won't be happening now. Which I got to be honest, that's a good statement that they're eventually going to shoot them down, but they kind of need to shoot them down now. But I do thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible and keep it rolling. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so with that, folks, it's now time to jump into our live chat questions proper. And first of all, let's grab our Morse code decoders of the night. We had the entire roster once again. We had Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Mason Miami, Johnny Dog, Norm Pritchett, Aalborg, Garbo, Her Royal Fluffiness, Kush, Tarek Sire, and Brian Blairstown. And they said the Morse code says, so, we are now talking to the dude we just declared a terrorist. Okay, LLT, LSA.
And and that's the sound of money. Y'all got that dead on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. And I mean, really, we are. I mean, how much sense does that make? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I don't think it makes a lot of sense to anybody. But still, I congratulate y'all greatly in the Lee Spring Army Signal Corps for getting that message correct tonight, and once again showing us why the Lee Spring Army Signal Corps is the best at message deciphering. And so with that, a huge congrats to y'all once again. And with that, we are on into the live chat questions proper. And so, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so jumping into our live chat questions here, we do have a question from OK State. You said, do y'all think that the stealthy Sentinel drone has been used over Venezuela? And will the B-2s be used in the opening salvo on Venezuela? And you guys rock.
And thank you so much for a great question. And thank you for the kind words. And I'd have to say it's likely that we have used higher-end reconnaissance equipment against the Venezuelans. It's highly likely that we're surveying their military sites primarily by satellite, but there could have been some RQ-170 Sentinels that may have even been flying within international waters and international airspace at a high enough altitude to be able to observe the lion's share of Venezuelan military facilities that would be on their coastline. So it is entirely possible that those have been used, but B-2 bomber flights, from what we've seen so far, it's been incredibly rare to see B-2s in the area. I don't think we've seen any at all. We've seen the B-1 Lancers and the B-52s, but I do not believe that a B-2 flight has ever been conducted yet publicly towards Venezuela, and considering that we would be trying to fearmonger them by doing that, we would make sure to have their transponders on. So I hope that does address that the best we can, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next live chat goes to Miguel. And Miguel said, do you know why there's a Russian Special Flight Squadron airplane inbound to New Delhi? Honestly, they're probably looking for more aid, honestly. You know, Russia's basically going bankrupt at this point, so they're probably looking for help with the gas crisis or something. I mean, usually Russia goes down to India when they need some type of help. But, you know, not sure how much India is going to be able to help them at this point, though. I mean, Russia's failing. But, Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that's a good question. A demonstration team, probably like a sign of goodwill. They're probably involved in an air show in the area, but still, wait, reread that again, Matty. Didn't they say there was like an aerobatics team aircraft?
They said a Special Flight Squadron airplane. I think they're referring to the diplomatic transport.
I thought they said a special aerobatics team aircraft. I was like, an air show maybe? I guess they're down there possibly dropping off delegates or maybe even actually requesting aid like Matthew's saying. You know, it's funny, folks. It's ironic. At one point, India was a tiny country, GDP-wise, and they had to get help from the Russians. Now, the Indians, as a nation, have a gross domestic product twice as large as Russia's. So a little bit funny that the Russians are now in a position that they have to ask India for help instead of the other way around. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well, and we're on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Vibin Waves, who said that maybe the U.S. is claiming to negotiate, make unmeetable demand, and then strike and claim as if we tried to negotiate.
I would say that's really, like, maybe, but that's really goofy. I would say it's possible. I'm not saying that what you're saying is goofy, but I'm saying if that's actually what they're doing, then that's kind of goofy, at least to me, because we've already been in a load of backroom talks with the Venezuelans from what we've heard endlessly over the past few months. So what is the point of stalling at the 11th hour our strikes for no reason? to talk to the Venezuelans one last time, already knowing that we would never accept their demands like we already haven't multiple times before, and then bomb them. We already have that precedent laid out that that we are just not willing to accept any offers they make, even if it's practically everything, almost including the removal of Maduro. So why in the world would we even entertain another round of talks at that point, when we already know that we're not willing to accept any offer the Venezuelans may make? So, that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. It's possible that we're doing that because the current administration makes no sense in foreign policy, just like the last one didn't. And so, it is what it is. I gotta be honest with y'all, folks, it's very demoralizing to me for us to have watched the news and covered it for years, 1,361 days as of today. And we've been doing it for that long, and I've never seen in the whole time that we've been covering this news an administration that actually handles foreign policy properly. There were so many of them historically that did, and there were some that would mess it up, but there was a lot more that would do it properly than would mess it up. And right now we are in an absolute dry spell for any sort of wisdom or good knowledge on foreign policy in the global stage, in the prior administration and in this one. Like, there's been so many embarrassments and bungle-ups from the U.S. government over the whole time we've been covering the news on the show. It has been it's honestly kind of embarrassing to a degree, and it is really something to see that it just keeps going. Because I was kind of the hope, folks, that the last administration was as bad as it could get in foreign policy due to its indecisiveness. And so generally I was thinking no matter who gets elected this time around, it'll probably be better. And it turns out that it's as bad or even worse than the last administration, which is honestly kind of shocking. Because I thought that the last administration, just being upfront with y'all, had set the bar as low as it could go. It had hit the floor. But apparently there's a little bit farther down to the floor than that, which is pretty shocking. So I hope that gives my 2 cents on that fairly well. And even still saying that, here's the thing that's stupid, folks, is that even putting out that preface that I had no good thoughts about the last administration either, someone is going to sit there and still say that we have president derangement syndrome, although we've made it incredibly clear over the years that we just have not been happy with any administration in their handling of foreign policy so far. But, and also with that, we're not here to appease those folks. Because if somebody cannot handle hearing the truth that the foreign policy is being handled poorly, like it was in the last administration, like we would have people leave in droves over the past few years whenever we point out something that the last administration did that was not in America's interest, like letting the Chinese balloon fly over. Clearly not in our interests. We should have shot it down over the Pacific, and we didn't. And loads of people wanted to get pissed off at us. Oh, clearly there's a bigger plan. There was no bigger plan. They let it fly over the United States because they were asleep at the wheel, and they didn't pay attention, and there was no order given to shoot it down, which would have required presidential authority at that point because it is dealing with the Chinese, which is a major issue. No, people left in droves back then, called us Nazis and fascists and everything because we were going against the current government then, which was left-leaning. And now that the current one's right-leaning and it's also making bad decisions like the last administration, then the same thing's happening just in reverse, to where now we're being called like liberal snowflakes and stuff because we don't live in la-la land and just glaze someone because we picked a political group like a football team and we just go with them even if it doesn't make sense. Like, people were getting pissed off earlier, folks, that we pointed out that every single foreign policy project that we've had so far this year has completely failed at this point, including Israel, Iran, India, and Pakistan, and Southeast Asia, and Ukraine. And it's like pointing that out is not a subjective thing. It is an objective fact that happened. I don't even know how in the world someone could say that we're going out of our way to just hate on someone in their foreign policy when we don't even hate them for one. But at the same time, the foreign policy absolutely sucks. I mean, we sit here on this channel, we give constructive criticism all the time about what should be done and how to improve things and what would work, or at least what would have a better chance of working. And then they do the complete opposite, and then it fails, obviously, as it will. And then we point out that it fails, and then people want to act like we have no clue what we're talking about when we literally watched exactly what we said wouldn't work get attempted, and then it fails.
It's that enforcer derangement syndrome. It's that pesky disease. I'm telling you, they have it coming out. They said, go to the doctor, get diagnosed, get you some diagnoses. They said, sir, go let the doctor check you out, sir. Let the doctor listen to their heart rate and everything, and let them check. They say it's a bad thing going around, sir. It's a bad disease. They said, sir.
Bro, you're using that soundboard hard, man. You're putting in the whole $500 in that thing, man. Honestly, and also I saw someone say I might not always agree with you guys, but I'm an adult and I realize other viewpoints are equally valid. But on this though, I have to ask, what will you disagree with? Where in the world has the foreign policy succeeded at this point over this year? Where like there's nowhere that it has. I mean, we actually did give fair credit, and people love to hear one thing in one ear and have it go right out the other when we do give fair credit, but we gave this administration more than its fair credit and praised it greatly for getting a ratified peace treaty between Thailand and Cambodia, because for the whole entire time that was working up to that point, we were saying that this will not work because it's a cheap ceasefire, it's not fixing the underlying issue, so on and so forth, which ended up being true that is still the case. And then they somehow forced it into a peace treaty, which was really impressive, and the U.S. stood to benefit on both sides with Thailand and Cambodia from that treaty. So we gave the current administration plenty of praise and said, oh, that's actually a really good move. This is the first time we've ever seen their foreign policy approach actually work yet. And then it's now failed. Like, that one even has failed. And we even said that one looked like it succeeded. And now that one's fallen through and failed as well. And that one made it all the way to a ratified peace treaty. I mean, that's the last step. That's the most that we could have ever done. And that still failed. And so, like, with that in mind, like, I would like to say, because I would always like to say that the United States is succeeding in foreign policy somewhere, but still at the same time wanting the best for the country. If it's not succeeding, we can't stick our heads in the sand and lie about it and say that it's doing fine or that it's better than ever. This is doing terribly. I mean, the approach that we're seeing right now is the worst that I've ever seen. I mean, we're literally failing in all fronts like we were in the last administration. I mean, the last administration left Taiwan high and dry. They hardly would support Israel in the fight against the Iranian proxy forces. We wouldn't even hardly go and bomb the Houthis when they blockaded the southern Red Sea. We were hesitant about even doing that. Like, all of that was just abysmal. I mean, it is as bad as the current situation. And it's still going on. It's just that we go through 9,000 hurdles to get to the same result we would have in the last administration, which was more than unsatisfactory. So,
Sir, we got a sick puppy here. We got a sick puppy. They said, sir, that foreign policy, sir, it's just not doing too hot. They said it's doing real cold. It's doing real cold. They said, let it get some air. Give it some air. They said it's like a fire with no oxygen. It's got no life to it. It's got no flame. They said it's looking real ugly. They said, sir, can we have a little bit of structure to it, sir? I said, no structure. We got to have it loose. That's what they say. That's the best way to have foreign policy is loose, wild and loose. That's what they call it. They said, sir, that's the best way to have that foreign policy, sir. We got to make that policy real foreign, real unfamiliar. We don't know what it looks like. We don't know what it's called and nothing. They said, call the vet, sir. This puppy's sick.
Call the vet. This puppy is sick. I got to be honest with y'all. This puppy is sick enough. It's about to get lethal injection. Really sad, but it's what happens. It's what happens when things go really downhill. You sit there and you look at it, you go, wow, that's really bad. Like the whole thing with Syria, the last administration took Al-Jilani off the terrorist designation, which I honestly thought wasn't a great idea. And now the current administration has him playing basketball with the CENTCOM commander. Honestly, not the greatest look. I know that we're trying to improve our relations with Syria, but maybe we could put a little bit of a brakes on that, considering that the guy literally was an Al-Qaeda-affiliated terrorist for about most of his life. Maybe not the best look. And also, another thing that I have to say is, why in the world are we making Venezuela a problem? We could have completely avoided this whole thing, and now we have to deal with it. Not the greatest idea. Many people have been saying, sir, you could have focused on Iran or Russia or China. And I said, no, we're going on Venezuela. We're going to make that whole thing a problem that we have to deal with, although there's bigger fish to fry. And they always say that I have the biggest fish, the greatest fish. A lot of people have been saying, wow, that's a great fish. And some people have been saying, what is it? And I say that it's grouper. It's grouper because we're all in the groupies here. We love groupies, great groupies, wonderful groupies, incredible groupies.
Honestly, I could talk like that too. Like I'm not the president. People aren't calling me sir, sir. But you know, when you go to like, for example, for us, all of us laymen out here, when you go to the McDonald's and stuff, and they say, "Sir, sir, would you like that a double Big Mac or a single Big Mac?" And you say, "Give me a single Big Mac." They said, "I want that single. I want that double Big Mac, sir." Honestly, I'm like, you know, the whole like sir, sir thing. It's like, you know. I do refer to myself in the third person sometimes. I'll say, you know, Matt doesn't like these shoes, or Matt doesn't like that car over there, or something like that. But I've never said, sir, sir, in the third person. That's just a little bit interesting.
It's quite. Like, but with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next question is going to go to Damien, who said, "What do you think? What do you think is the major great deal that Zelensky will have tomorrow with Macron?"
Oh, we already know what it is generally. It's mostly an air defense package. They're going to be getting more missile-based air defense systems on the ground, so SAMP-Ts is what France will most likely provide, and they're most likely also going to be getting Mirage 2000s. I saw someone in the chat earlier say that someone else has said that they'll be getting Rafalas, and I would have to respectfully disagree with that. Rafalas are highly unlikely, considering that they're a 4th plus gen aircraft or multi-role airframe, so for that reason, it's highly unlikely that those will be provided. The Mirage 4 is a very capable 4th generation airframe, and considering that France is going to be replacing their Mirage 2000s with Rafalas, it's highly likely that those will be available to be sent to Ukraine as second wind aircraft instead of sending Rafalas that would be relatively new in service generally. So with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next question here is going to go to none other than the consul, who said, "Could the president's statement on talks with Maduro be a false statement to lower Maduro's guard, like we did with the Iranians during the 12-day war?"
I would have to say it is unlikely because generally the approach and like I'm saying this in the most unbiased way, folks, but I also have a brain and recognize patterns. So if this doesn't sound good to you, this is just the pattern I'm recognizing. The current president likes to pretend like everything is a business deal that's happening over a plot of property in New York City. So this is a legitimate attempt, most likely, like it was with the Russians and with the Chinese and with everyone else on the planet, to actually have a sit down with Maduro and talk to him, and that will most likely end up in nothing and buy the Venezuelans time, and then we'll go and waffle around for a couple of months after that and indecisively decide something to do, and then we'll half-ass do that, and then we'll completely drop the situation altogether and walk off. That's probably what's going to happen at this point, because that's what's been happening in basically every other area of the world, so I have very low hopes that this is going to go anywhere beneficial, at least. So with that, I hope that does address that the best we can, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Moose. And Moose said, "Do you think there's a chance they are letting the drones fly so that way eventually they get to a result that can activate Article 5?
I would doubt it, because generally there already is grounds in a way to activate Article 5 if you really wanted to stretch it right now. And generally that would also look pretty bad, at least on the civilian governments in charge of most NATO states, if we allowed for these drones to create unsafe conditions to where people got killed for us to justify in Article 5. Because I would tell y'all right now, if people got killed tomorrow from one of these drones in a civil aviation incident, I am going to be as livid at the Russians as I would be at all of the civilian governments in NATO that didn't shoot those drones down and remove that unsafe scenario from our skies. And I think a lot of people would generally be in that camp as well, because it's not like this has been happening recently and it's something brand new and they haven't had time to react. This has been going on for months, and yet they still allow this to keep going until someone is probably going to get killed one day, and that won't look too good on them once people do unfortunately get killed from this whole ordeal. But with that, I hope that does address that the best that we can, and with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so we are moving on to our next one, which goes to Rocket, and thank you very much, Rocket, for that good question right here. He said, "Any Chinese flag merchant cargo ships passed through the straits at the same time these drones were sighted over NATO airspace?"
There's actually a huge amount of ships that were passing through the strait during that time. Let me go see if I can back up the tracker to show this. Let's see here. Let's see. Let me see if I can find some here. Right now in the strait, there is a Belgian tanker, a A Liberian? Oh my god, that thing looks terrible. But a Liberian flag tanker, another Liberian flag tanker, another Liberian flag tanker, and a Greek flag tanker, and let's see, a Seychelles flag tanker, or the Seychelles, I believe it's pronounced. Um, and let's see, a Singaporean flag tanker. Mr. Senator, I'm Singaporean. We also have a Bahamas flag tanker, a liquid natural gas tanker, a Maltan container ship, South Korean tanker, a Saudi tanker. There's actually a decent amount of ships in the strait right now, but you can see that it's starting to thin out a little bit, at least with the ships that are actually trying to make that passage to a degree. So it does appear that the traffic is starting to thin out slowly because of the seizure. But at the same time, we would assume that there probably was a Chinese flag tanker in the area, because I also don't really know how to do a way back on this and see what it looked like several days ago when the ship was actually seized. So with that, I hope that does address it the best we can, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next question here is going to go to none other than guess who? Of course, you're not going to guess who, because there's a lot of people that threw in questions.
Yeah, I was thinking. I was like,
this one goes to Ghost, who said, "Do you think the B-52s in the Mediterranean are going for Iran?"
I think they're going to Saudi Arabia or Qatar to start building up forces against Iran. I think that's what they're doing. So in a way, they're going to be going up against Iran, but I don't think they're bombing them tonight. So with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to AF Kaplan, who said, assuming there are negotiations with Venezuela and no military action takes place, do you think the said negotiations will be fruitful?
I don't think any negotiations with Venezuela will be fruitful because apparently Venezuela, from what we've heard, has offered the world in prior negotiations, and we've completely refused every offer. They're clearly not going to depose Maduro, and Maduro isn't going to self-depose himself and live in exile. He's already made that clear. So the only offer that we could be making in talks would be we get everything we want and Maduro goes, and Maduro isn't going to accept that. So these talks are completely pointless, or they're going to be treading ground that we've already covered and was largely pointless. So and also on top of that, considering that the Maduro regime would survive even if we made an agreement with them, the Maduro regime is going to survive longer, and the Chinese and the Russians could just continue to arm Venezuela during that period of time where we're talking about we made the deal of the century and then screw us over later because we realized that we've been duped. And then when we try and deal with Venezuela, then they're much well armed than they are right now. So with that, I hope that has addressed it the best I can. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Kryeth, who said, curious question, what is the expectation once Russia finally hits no manpower and their economy finally tanks? And will they finally end the war, or should we expect worst case, like nukes?
At that point, they've completely exhausted all of their resources and the war ends. They can't even try and start a war with NATO at that point because they wouldn't even have the military or economic ability to finance or actually start a war with NATO. So generally at that point, they've exhausted their chance to escalate and try and start a war with NATO, and the war has ended completely. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Kev, who said, should we defend Taiwan? And what are the ramifications if we don't defend Taiwan? And yes, semiconductors are big, but I'm sure those plants will be taken out if Taiwan is lost.
And if the semiconductor plants were taken out, we've got a much worse problem than the Chinese controlling them. Then the whole world is generally without semiconductors. And here in the West, that's a death knell for our economy. So we have to defend Taiwan, not just for the TSMC semiconductors, but we also have to defend Taiwan because of our island defense chain against the Chinese. Here in between South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, the Philippines, and Indonesia are these really shallow sorts of areas of sea. And this basically, as long as we have all of these countries, South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, the Philippines, and Indonesia on our side, is a giant barrier stopping Chinese submarines from going into the open world outside of China. If we lose Taiwan, and we do not fight to defend them, and China takes Taiwan easily without as big a fight, that means that China has completely circumvented our island defense chain, and that then means that they could build submarine bases on the eastern coast of Taiwan, and once they want to go to war with the United States or force us into a confrontation with them, their submarines slip out of those pens on the east coast of Taiwan right into some of the deepest parts of the Pacific, and they're pretty much undetectable from that point forward therefore they can end up striking commercial shipping anywhere in the world and raise hell for our supply chains and logistics in the Pacific and worldwide. So generally, not just for the economic reasons of keeping the semiconductors within the Western sphere, it's really more so for defensive purposes and stopping the Chinese from commerce raiding on a massive scale if a major war was to break out. Because we can stop them from crossing the island chain. That should be fairly easy because the submarines will have to get very close to being above the thermal layer, or they'll be in an area where there is no thermal layer, so it'll be very easy to detect and destroy their submarines if they try and break into the Pacific or elsewhere. But if they have Taiwan, we don't even have the chance of doing that. We have to try and find a needle in a haystack, which is finding a submarine in the middle of the Pacific or somewhere else. So I hope that does address it the best I can, and with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
All right, so this one is going to go to Adam. He said, any word on Sudan? I'm not finding too much in the media, and any insight would be helpful, and it's very concerning over there, and thank you.
And I gotta say, can you reread that one again?
Yeah, what's happening in Sudan?
Oh, at the moment, it's a civil war. That's the best way I can describe it. It's a civil war at the moment, and we don't really have a huge amount of details here on this channel, at least, about what's actually happening down there. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I possibly can. Unfortunately, I just don't really follow that conflict a lot. And so with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
So this one goes to Vorovine. And they said, what kind of circumstances is possible to stop the ships that has the Russian oil? Now, you know what is possible with that, Vorovine, is they could try to close down the, the waterways near the Baltics. They could try to do that, meaning NATO could try. But pretty much, honestly, any real interdiction of the Russian Shadow Fleet vessels is pretty much going to lead to a direct war with Russia, at least in my opinion. I'm not sure if there's really a way to do that, because unlike the United States, letting, like, for example, the Marshall-flagged oil tanker get kidnapped by Iran, and we really don't do much about it, at least for now, I think Russia would take that opportunity to escalate a lot, because they really are getting choked out at this point when it comes to their oil sales around the world, and they're already suffering. So then if their ships start getting boarded or, halted or stopped, that would be the nail in the coffin. So I think Russia would definitely respond to that, and it could get quite ugly. But Enforcer, what do you think?
I would have to say that really is the only way that we can try and seize them. And technically, since we've sanctioned them, we actually do have legal authority to seize ships that are involved in sanctions jumping. And also another thing that is concerning that is that while the goods on board may be Russian, the vessels are flagged usually outside of Russia in flags of convenience. So say Panama or another country like that. So we can actually go and seize those vessels, and generally the issue would more so lie with the country that we seize the vessel from, like, say, Panama in this example, or the Seychelles or Liberia or elsewhere, instead of the Russians themselves, at least by the international law precedent that's been laid out from ship seizures. The issue would lie between the country that seized the ship and the country that that vessel was flying as its flag when it was seized. So with that, I hope that addresses that somewhat well, but still the Russians would create an issue out of it. We've seen that every other time that that's been conducted, where a vessel like that has been seized, the Russians usually make a huge stink about it. And if we started to go around and just seize all of the shadow tankers, the Russians could actually get heated enough that they might start a major war over that, because at that point, not only are the Ukrainians stopping them from getting any oil onto the ships at the ports, but we're also stopping any ships from even showing up at the ports if they were operational ever. So with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who was the last person who put in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Chef Danny B. And Danny said, I have a question. He said, how can we afford to move so much expensive equipment and personnel to the Caribbean to just walk away? And Danny, that is a good question right there. Honestly, I think the USA has a thing for blowing money. Some people have. Well, look, I won't do it. I won't do it. But the US has a thing for blowing money. And there's a lot of other things too. The US has a thing for, but blowing money is king. It's number one. The Fed says that they have infinite money. They can just print it. So they just print the money. We just go into more debt, and we just wait until it catches up with us, basically, because eventually it will. But for now, we spend it like it grows on trees at this point. So $1 billion here, $1 billion there, it's just whatever to the United States. We just spend money like it's going out of style. But Enforcer, what say you?
Well, the reason why we do that is because some people sometimes have a very hard time putting two and two together. Like some people say, well, we had to bring the military down there to scare them into negotiating. They were already negotiating a month ago, and they were practically giving terms of unconditional surrender on their end to us, and we weren't accepting it. So we clearly didn't have to move in all of these forces to get them to negotiate. They were already giving up a month ago, according to the rumors that we were hearing from U.S. officials about what they were offering us. So the whole thing was basic, like, I don't even know how to say it without it sounding very jaded and aggravated at this point, but basically we're just doing this because we like to showboat and, spend huge amounts of money in the process.
He's a showboat.
We're showboating. We're sending all of these boats down there so that way they can say, sir, no greater force has ever been built up in the history of America. It's bigger than D-Day, so that way we can say that, so that way we can glaze a little bit more or something like that here on the home front. And then if you point that out, then people would get pissed off and say a whole bunch of stupid stuff to you that doesn't make any sense. Like, clearly he's unpredictable and it works like it's worked anywhere else. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, because the truth of it is, it doesn't make any sense to send all those forces into the area and then leave. I'll be entirely honest with y'all, it also didn't make sense for us to send all of our forces into CENTCOM's command to just bomb Iran for one night with assets that weren't even in CENTCOM. They flew in all the way from NORTHCOM, bombed them, and then flew back. So we didn't even have to move all that stuff that we had in CENTCOM to CENTCOM. We could have just bombed them like we did, and completely saved a whole bunch of expense. But, we didn't there either. So I hope that does address that the best I can, in my opinion. Because it's crazy, because I remember that there was this big thing that they were going to be cutting down on government spending, and it only seems like we're spending more on stuff that doesn't even really make that much sense. Like, humongous military buildups that would make you think that the Gulf War is about to happen, and then we drop like one bomb, call a victory, and then we all go home. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best we possibly can. And with that, we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I have to say a humongous, incredible thanks to everyone for supporting the fundraiser tonight for Nova Ukraine. We were able to raise $2.7 $1,000 in support of Nova Ukraine, which is $210 over the fundraising goal. I've got to congratulate you all greatly for supporting that fundraiser, and also all the super chatters tonight who are supporting this channel and helping it to keep on running. I also got to say a huge thanks to all 12.5 thousand people who were here tonight at the peak, and the 86,000 people who have watched the stream before it ended. We're entirely honored and appreciative to know that we are the primary source of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people every single month who come to the Enforcer channel to hear their daily news. And so with that, folks, we will be seeing you all tomorrow if there is a short war video to be made, and if there is one to be made, Matthew will be the one making it.
It's my day. I forgot.
Man, you went, probably.
Oh, man, that was a shocker right there. I was like, oh, that's right. Tomorrow is my day. I forgot to put that on my reminders list, but it is my day tomorrow. I will be making that video, by the way.
And we will see you all tomorrow on that video if it is made, if there is enough news, because it might not be made, there might not be enough news, so we'll have to see. But if there is enough news, Matthew will be making that, or we will see you all on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 48 hours of the news from around the world. I thank you all so much once again for watching, and we thank you all for being the LSA. And of course, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, long live the Republic, and long live the Lee Spring Army.
And it was shocking. He said, "It's your day, sir." I said, "Oh my God, I forgot to put that on my reminders list," is what I'm trying to say. But anyways, folks, with that, thank you all for another fantastic fundraiser stream tonight on Sunday with $2,700 plus raised tonight. That is fantastic once again, and we do appreciate that very, very much from the LSA. And we will be seeing you all tomorrow midday for that short war video if there is enough news to cover, of course, and definitely on Tuesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern. We're still using Eastern as our time zone, even though we've changed it to Mountain Time, but 10 p.m. Eastern for simplicity's sake. And also, by the way, if anything crazy happens between tomorrow, Tuesday, etc., we will be lurking around to do a midday short war stream, if you want to call it that, emergency stream, I guess, if there is something major that happens. But in the meantime, though, thank you all for watching, and of course, Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, get some rest, and good night.